Okay, welcome everybody. I would like to call the meeting to order. I'm sorry we're late, but the meeting we had before this ran right up to about 15 minutes ago or something like that. It was, there we go. So I am calling the meeting to order at 1:03 p.m. And with that, I would like to read the land acknowledgement today, and so I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty Number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations. Thank you. Miigwech. And with that, I do have a motion moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the Planning Committee agenda dated September 14th, 2022 be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. All those in favor? And that carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, I will go into the public portion of this meeting. So again, welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or their representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present in person or electronically will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting these applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving a presentation. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address. Please note that the presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please also be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted of the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. So we will now deal with application number Z02-2022 HT and B02-04 2022 HT Lindgren at 0 Lindgren Road East. And over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located on Lindgren Road East. The property has an approximate area of 36.3 hectares with 523 meters of frontage on Lindgren Road East. The lands are vacant and contain a centrally located hill with forested slopes that slope down to at varying degrees in all directions. Low-lying lands on the property contain wetlands and watercourses. Surrounding uses are rural residential and rural in nature. The lot is designated rural in the town official plan, is zoned Rural 1 with exception 1633 in the zoning bylaw, and is within the rural precinct in the community planning permit bylaw. The application before you is a rezoning to permit the creation of 3 new rural lots with frontage on Lindgren Road East. The requested rezoning would change the zoning on the lands to a Rural 1 with amended exception 1633 zone, a rural one with new exception AAA zone, and a conservation zone. The applicant also made 3 concurrent consent applications. The conservation zone would be applied to wetlands and to a water course, including the lands within 20 meters of that water course. And you can see on your screen, the areas are shown in a yellow with a yellow hatching over them. The rural one with amended 1633 exception zone would apply to the remaining lands except for severed lot 1, which is to the, on your screen, it's the furthest lot on the, I guess it would be the north or the left. And would include provisions to require a 9-meter wide treed screening buffer along the road, prohibit development and site alteration within 15 meters of the limits of any of the adjacent conservation zone, save and except for a 5-meter wide driveway, and implement the recommendations of the scoped environmental impact study and addendum letter submitted in support of the application, which was prepared by Mikowski Nielsen Associates Limited, and it would do that through site plan control or the community planning permit bylaw. The rural one with AAA exception zone would apply to the severed lot 1 and would include provisions to apply all exceptions applicable within the other zone, but also include a reduced 109-meter road frontage. The proposed lot dimensions and areas for each proposed new rural lot are listed here and are provided in the report. The minimum area would be approximately 4.4 hectares, and the minimum frontage would be approximately 109 meters. The official plan contains policies that require new lots within the rural area to be sized to accommodate their use. In this instance, the lot is to be zoned rural 1, but is to be used as a rural residential lot. Minimum lot requirements within the rural designation state that new rural lots should be a minimum of 4 hectares in area and have 134 meters in frontage. But for rural residential lots, the minimum lot requirements are 2 hectares in area and 134 meters of frontage. So in consideration of these requirements, whether the lots are rural or rural residential makes no difference. The proposal results in the creation of 2 lots that are undersized in terms of frontage. With respect to their intended use as rural residential lots, the official plan contains policies to restrict the number of new rural residential lots that may be severed from an existing rural lot as existed in June 2006. This cap is set at 3 new lots. It should be noted that this policy is the reason that the requested zoning change does not propose to rezone the lands to a rural residential zone, which would be more appropriate considering their intended use. If the lands were zoned rural residential, the proposal would also clearly offend this policy, the proposal would offend this policy, as 2 new lots were severed off the 2006 lot in 2007, and they're shown here. And 1 more was severed off this 2006 lot in 2017. So on your screen you see the, with green border is the existing lot that was in place in 2006, and I've just shown the lot severances that have occurred since. This proposed application creates 3 additional lots, and as you heard earlier, the cap is set at 3, so this application would exceed that cap. It's important to note, however, that rural and rural residential lots differ in more than just their size. They also permit different uses, with rural lots permitting a broader range than rural residential lots. From a zoning use permissions perspective, it would be more appropriate to restrict the uses on these proposed lots to rural residential uses, in keeping with natural heritage protection policies contained in Part B of the official plan. This is because a scoped environmental impact study prepared by Michalski Nielsen Associates Limited and submitted in support of this development to address those policies evaluated the suitability of the proposed new lots and their subsequent use as rural residential lots. Since that technical submission found the new lots would be appropriate for rural residential development only, and the lots are intended for rural residential purposes, it would be appropriate to consider the lots as rural residential lots for the purpose of considering the general intent of the town's official plan policies. In this context, the development would be considered generally not in keeping with the plan's 3-lot severance cap, which are intended to limit fragmentation of the town's rural lands into rural residential lots, avoid land use conflicts, and promote more efficient development patterns that encourage growth and intensification in appropriately serviced community and settlement areas. In addition to the scoped EIS prepared by Michalski Nielsen Associates Limited, an addendum letter was also submitted in support of this proposal. Both the study and the addendum letter characterized the natural heritage features on the site and commented and recommended building envelopes and other mitigation measures for ensuring their protection. And this is a figure from that addendum letter that shows the features as they were mapped and building envelopes designed to protect them. The ultimate conclusions of the impact assessment work was that the proposed severances would be fully appropriate for rural residential development, provided the impact mitigation measures recommended are implemented. Notwithstanding the conclusions, some concerns exist with respect to the work relating to severed lots 1, 2, and 3, and the drainage features within or adjacent to them. Severed lots 1 and 2 abut a drainage feature which is labeled North Tributary 1, and I'm just sliding my cursor over it. And according to the environmental technical materials, this feature is said to convey flow from the opposite side of Lindgren Road east, and I think you can see the water course there, or the feature there, and was noted as containing standing water at the time of the author's site visit. Notwithstanding this, this feature is characterized as a diffuse surface drainage feature. This feature connects with 2 other similarly described features, which are North Tributary 1A, and I'm just sliding my cursor over it, and North Tributary 1B, and I'm just showing it on the screen. And these lands connect within lands that are said to contain a wetland pocket. According to the scoped environmental impact study, these features are to be protected through the implementation of a building envelope, which maintains a 15-meter buffer to each, but the application of these building envelopes is inconsistently applied. For instance, the building envelope for Lot 1, which is shown here, is said to maintain a 15-meter buffer to the feature known as North Tributary 1B, which is shown here, but not to the feature known as North Tributary 1A. And vice versa, the envelope for Lot 2 maintains a 15-meter buffer to North Tributary 1A, but not to North Tributary 1B, which is shown here. Further, the wetland pockets referred to in these materials are not mapped nor shown for inclusion within the conservation zone. Another diffuse discharge drainage feature is located in the vicinity of Lot 3, and it's referred to as South Tributary 1, and it also flows into a wetland pocket, which is also neither mapped nor shown for inclusion within the conservation zone. Given these concerns, it was difficult to understand how the envelopes shown will protect these features. As these drainage features contain surface water but aren't called watercourses and flow through wetland pockets immediately into wetlands, it was difficult to understand why these were not considered wetlands. If they are also wetlands, the intent of the official plan would appear better served by also zoning these features conservation and maintaining the lot requirements for rural residential lots to avoid negatively impacting them. At a minimum, if these features exist within proximity to any building envelopes and contain standing water, it would be appropriate to consider the suitability of standard Class 4 septic systems on the proposed lots, or whether enhanced treatment facilities should be used. Just bring your attention to the screens for some site photos. The applicant placed blue flags along the proposed frontages, which are very difficult to see, but these photos are generally aimed at the frontages of each of the proposed lots, thanks to those blue flags. Based on what I've said earlier, just the feature that I was referring to, North Tributary 1, on the photo on the left, you can see that there is standing water in it, and that it appears to contain a defined bed and bank, which are part of the definition of a watercourse. And if you look at the picture on the right, you can see the culvert under Lingren Road East, where it also looks like there is a defined bed and bank, but at the time of my site visit, there was no water flowing. The picture on the left is the wetland pocket that this feature flows within, but again, it's not mapped as part of the conservation zone, or appeared not to be mapped. And this last picture just shows at the terminus of South Tributary 1, there also appeared to be a wetland pocket, which again was not mapped. The planning application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. One letter of support was submitted along with the application, and no other comments were provided by the public. The building department noted that due to the wetlands within the area and the surface water, advanced effluent treatment for sanitary systems may be preferable for this development to ensure groundwater will not be affected towards neighboring properties. Comments were received from the district and are appended to the report as attachment 4. District staff noted that they would have no objection to the approval of the development, provided the town is satisfied the development of the access to the proposed lands is appropriate and the recommendations of the submitted environmental work is implemented through appropriate development control techniques. The application appears not to conform to the policies of the town official plan or be consistent with the provincial policy statement, so staff are recommending that the application be denied. As committee is aware, the Town of Huntsville's Community Planning Permit Bylaw was passed by Council in July 2022, but it's currently under appeal and not yet in full force and effect. Subject lands are contained within the rural precinct in the CPP bylaw. Lot requirements for lands within the rural precinct include a minimum area of 4 hectares and a minimum frontage of 134 meters. So a Class 3 permit approval would be required to authorize a variation from these minimum requirements if that bylaw was in effect. Having regard to the provisions of the CPP bylaw, staff would not recommend that Council approve any variation from the rural lot requirements in this instance if the bylaw was in effect. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that committee may have.
Thank you for that, Richard. At this point, I will call upon the applicant and/or their representative to come forward.
Chair, Richard, you could just put up the map showing the 3 lots plus retained.
This one?
I know the smaller one that shows the overall area. That would do.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Madam Chair, I didn't know what
You-
knowledge you had here, but I'm going old school.
Okay, and you've got notes. You've got notes, Terry. That's great. Thank you. There we go. All right. And if you could both sign in before you can start speaking now, Terry, if you want. Just sign in. after. Thank you. And state your name. That'd be great.
Madam Chair, just for the record, my name is Terry Serrers, 303 Lindgren Road East. So I'm on this fine road. I'm a good friend and neighbor with Eric. I'm here representing Eric and Kathy Lindgren. We also should have on Zoom Gord Nielsen from Mikowski Nielsen. He's here to answer any questions should committee have with regard to environmental issues. I think it would be appropriate before we start to get a bit of historical and I would say big picture of what's happening on Lindgren Road East. The majority of lands on Lindgren Road East are owned by, or have been owned by the Lindgren family for over 100 years. And that's shown in the black here, approximately 200 acres. The Lindgren Road East starts at Highway 11 and comes in about a half an acre, and then eventually hits the property, traverses it to the south, and then as a municipal road continues to the southwest corner where it terminates. So this is a local road. You have local traffic, you don't have through traffic. When Eric, some 20 years ago, talked to me about this, he was very clear that his goal in approving or allowing for some severances on the property, and he commenced with those 3 lots, or 4 lots in the south end, parts 1 to 4 here. And he looked at that and said, I want to create a rural lifestyle community here. I want the environment considered, I want forestry considered, I want the lot sizes considered, so we feel rural in character. And that's where it started. Those properties are all 3 to 5 acres with over 300 feet of frontage. So at that time, they could not be severed. The requirement at that time was 200 feet and 400 feet of frontage, so they couldn't be severed further. What you see in the remaining of this property are other lots that have been severed over the years. And those lots go as high as 14 acres in size, a lot of them with 200 to 300, up to 600 feet, 700 feet of frontage, and a couple of lots at the north end are just under the 300 feet frontage. So we have a mixture here of rural residential lots and rural lots. When we looked at the remaining lands, and these are the subject lands that you've been discussing, those are those 90, that's that large parcel, the 90 acres. When we originally looked at that, we were preparing to put rural residential lots on, similar to the other ones in the area. And as the manager of planning has indicated, that was not the option given the certain policy provisions in the OP. So we then approached it on the basis of what are the development rights on this land? Development rights are granted through zoning. The development rights on the land are rural, RU1, as indicated by the manager. The requirements in an RU1 zone is 10 acres, 4 hectares, and 120 meters of frontage. We then drafted and applied for the 3 lots severance, and commence after that, as the manager has indicated, to prepare an EIS. The objectives of that EIS, and we got to be clear on this, the objectives was that, number 1, the lots, if we were to, I'll just turn that off. If we were to strictly take the lot frontages along Lindgren Road, as shown in that 90-acre parcel, we could meet the zoning requirements today. We could exceed them 120 meters. Through the EIS process, however, and that's where I was looking at the lots here, the northerly lot, Lot 1, is a lot we're really, in my mind, considering. All the other lots are in excess of the development rights that's granted to this property. We can get into debate, and I will later, that we have to consider the official plan requirement, 134 meters, but it's not fixed. And I'll get into that in a moment. So in essence, we could have created 3 lots plus a retained and meet all the frontage, meet all the area requirements. But due to the EIS was prepared, through that process, to determine first the conservation lands, which we are now prepared to have rezoned conservation. And secondly, for those development envelopes that you, Mr. Clark has indicated, those development envelopes dictated that lot configuration. In other words, the lot line between lots 1 and 2 in the northern end had to be slightly adjusted, the result of which we are at 109 meters as opposed to the 120 meters that are required through zoning. The lands are zoned RU1. Those are where development rights start. So we are approximately 40 feet short on lot 1 to meeting your zoning requirements. The rest of the lots are in excess of that. As indicated, the EIS that completed on the site did confirm those sites. So they are developable lots from an environmental standpoint. Further to the report that I prepared in submission of these, with due respect to my colleague here, I believe, and I can get into debate on that, that the development is consistent with the provincial policy statement, particularly in the sections 1.1, where they deal with building on existing infrastructure, providing housing, meeting environmental standards, et cetera, et cetera. We know it conforms to the district OP. We've indicated that from the district. And with regard to the town's OP, the issue here is we're creating rural lots. The reference to it doing rural residential lots, we're not into that. Your official plan specifically says in the rural area that we can create larger lots, and the standard is 4 hectares, 10 acres, and generally, they should be in the realm of 134 meters, generally. It's not fixed, it's not a shell clause. But further, and this hasn't been referenced, but in your official plan, there are 2 sections that are very pertinent here, because all we're dealing with is a lot frontage and 1 lot. We're not, I don't agree with the fact that we're dealing with the number of lots, because we're not dealing with this thing that we're dealing with rural residential lots. These lots are zoned rural. You have it planned in your OP, you have it in your zoning bylaw. But there are 2 sections, Part C, Section 8.2, and this is the reference to the lot sizes in the rural areas. And that particular clause makes reference to 4 acres and 134 meters frontage, and it says they shall generally, as guidelines. But the other critical factor in your OP and policy is Part F, Section 2.1.6, and it specifically directs that these numerical values are not fixed. They're only guidelines. The wording is guidelines. And it goes further to say that you as a council can actually vary those so long as 2 things occur. Number 1, it's minor in nature. And secondly, if it meets the intent of the overall plan. And here again, I think you have to view the overall direction in the plan for other policies that this development is meeting, and also the fact that they're in character with this development that's happened here before. So as a final argument, I guess, in support of the rezoning, I would have to say that first, the environmental impact statement prepared by a professional ecologist indicates that yes, this development is developable. It can occur. It's suitable for development. We may fine-tune things here and there, but it's suitable. The environmental wetland features, I believe the significant ones, are being protected, and we've agreed to have them zoned conservation with a buffer. And the lot frontage requirement from 109, or from 120 meters down to 109 for lot 1, in my mind, is minor in nature in terms of what your zoning bylaw requires for a rural zone. Thirdly, I guess we're protecting the rural character of this particular area. Mr. Lindgren has, in the past, on his own, placed private covenants on all the lots created on here that within roughly 10 meters of the roadway, there's no cutting of vegetation, save except for a driveway in. And when you go down that road now, you'll see it. They're well-treed, the lots are well-treed with a driveway into the lot. So we're not destroying in any way the character of that area or the vegetation. And one other goal that hasn't been addressed, and I think we often miss this when we're doing planning these days, but I think it's come to the forefront in the last little while with the pandemic, is we are providing additional housing stock, which is highly needed in this area. People want to come here. There is additional opportunity here with this lot. So in conclusions, we would request approval of the consents and approval of the rezoning or recommendation for rezoning is based on those facts, consistent with the OP, conforming to the district plan, generally complies with what is required for the intent of the zoning bylaw and character with lots, protects the environmental features of the subject lands. Now, I think I also would like to address, if I could, Madam Chair, maybe 4 items in Mr. Clark's planning report, and I don't think that they're ones that, well, some of them will require action if we go that route. First of all, as indicated, in terms of community support, in terms of any objection that he's indicated that we have total support for this development. There's nobody objecting to it. In fact, the letter of support on one of the lots, which is directly across from this development, supports Eric's endeavor to create this rural character community. We are all proud of where we live here. We are proud of the environmental constraints that Eric has undertaken. I'd like to speak to one other item that's in the report, which is the requirement that's recommended by staff for site plan approval. You can certainly put site plan approval on here. It's an agreement that will be placed on each individual lot at the time of building permit. However, again, with a little bit of my planning background I have, I'd recommend that it'd be a better way to undertake that, because the majority of the environmental impacts and features that came out of the EIS, they're already being addressed through the conservation, zoning, and the buffering. So what we've got left to deal with in the recommendations of the EIS are the, I'll call the processing issues, such as what time of the season do you cut trees, silk curtains, those type of things. That type of requirement will be the same in any site plan agreement that would be put on the property. It's the same wording, whatever. However, with the 5126 agreement, I think it has a couple advantages by putting it through the consent process. Number one is, if it goes through the consent process, it's placed on all the lots once. Once it's on there, it is there for any prospective buyer. It's up front. It's clear, it's transparent, people know what they have to do, as opposed to waiting to a later stage of site plan control. And the other fact that I think I would like 5126 agreement is that it certainly is more cost effective. You put one agreement to 3. As I said, it's clarity to the owners.
Terry,
And in
I
essence-
just want to let you know.
Yes.
we're-
Okay, fair enough.
Just
Okay.
so you know.
Okay, the other ones, the other area that I'd like to address maybe, and it reflects on the report of staff, is that the request for limiting the uses on the property. I believe Mr. Clark has indicated that staff would prefer the lots being used only for rural residential purposes. As we were originally our intent to do that anyways, and that's a development, we wouldn't be in objection to that occurring. So as a result of my presentation today, we would recommend certainly approval of the rezoning with 2 changes. Number one, to delete the requirement for site plan control at the zoning stage, and instead have at the consent stage requirement for 5126 agreement. We're prepared to put an agreement on top, it's just what type of agreement. And secondly, we have no objections to inclusion in the zoning amendment of a clause that would limit the uses on these lots to the other uses similar in the area, which are rural residential. So that would remove some of the uses in the rural zone, which I know the manager is concerned about, and we've looked at and said, yeah, such things as forestry operations, farms, equestrian centers, these bigger uses that could have impact on the environment. So we're prepared to put that type of restriction on, because I believe it's reasonable. So in conclusion, thank you very much, and I wish and request your approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Did you want, does that suffice? Okay, perfect. At this point, I will ask if there are any members of the audience, the public, who would like to speak to this application. Okay, seeing none, I will read the motion that's before us before I turn it over to committee for questions. And this is the correct one, right? Julie, is this? No, that's not the right one. Yep. Okay, that's it. Okay. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend denial of zoning bylaw amendment Z02 2022 HTE. And with that, I will turn it over to committee for questions with respect to this application. Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. I have 2 points I want to get to. One is, in Richard's report, there were the later photos that you showed were of some wetland drainage areas and clearly wetland areas that you said were not addressed by the Mikulski-Nielsen report. And I'm wondering if maybe over the phone or wherever they are, if they could address those specific items. And then the other point I wanted to make is while I'm not opposed necessarily to allowing this to move forward, this development, I do agree with staff's mention of a more rigorous or more enhanced sewage treatment on site per lot. That would certainly, I think that would go a long way to provide any mitigation towards negative impacts to the water and the water courses. So those 2 points.
Great. Do we have Mr. Mikulski on?
Chair Alcock, I do see a hand raised online. I can bring him into the meeting.
Yep, that'd be great.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Good afternoon, members of the committee and Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Gord Nielsen from Mikulski-Nielsen Associates, and our address is 16 Robert Boyer Lane, Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L 1R9. Now, with respect to the drainage features that Mr. Clark had mentioned, first, I think that Mr. Clark has mischaracterized, or at least only partially characterized, a portion of our report where we speak about the drainage that comes underneath that forms the drainage course NT1 between lots 1 and 2. We do mention that under the fall conditions, when we looked at that water course, that there was standing water. But we also mentioned after that the standing water was less than a foot wide and less than 2 inches deep. And that's fairly consistent with the photo that Mr. Clark showed you that showed some standing water there as well. And I will point out that that's immediately below the culvert, where there is a bit of a scoured area, as one would expect below a roadside culvert, where some pooled water can collect because of scouring that occurs under spring freshet conditions. This is hummocky terrain, so there are little pockets of areas that are poorly drained, and I believe that's what's captured in Mr. Clark's characterization of the area adjacent to the development envelope for Lot 3. But that area drains to the west. That's the beginnings of a tributary that drain to the west and which are well outside of the envelope that we've identified for lot 3. I would just like to say we've taken a good look at these lands. We've done all the species at risk work. We've really looked at the watercourses with care. The drainage that comes across Lindgren Road between lots 1 and 2 is very intermittent drainage and is very diffuse. It is an area. There is an area of scour immediately down gradient of the Lindgren Road, as I mentioned, and it becomes better defined just up gradient to where it enters the wetland. Our recommendation was to protect the large wetland with 15-meter buffer, and to protect that watercourse where it becomes better defined with a 15-meter buffer as well. We've been very careful in identifying very small building envelopes on each of these lots. As Mr. Serreras had indicated, that did change the configuration of the lots because we felt that it was important to create those building envelopes in the best possible locations. Those building envelopes fit very well with this terrain. They provide very good protection for the natural resources of this property, including large areas of wetland and including most of the woodland area of these properties, as well as the drainage features and more defined watercourse features. So I hope that answers the question. I'm certainly happy to stay on and answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you for that follow-up, Councillor.
Thank you for the follow-up opportunity. So I'm just referencing again the first photo that says, photo number 7, view of wetland pocket in vicinity of building envelopes for proposed severed lots 1 and 2. And when I look at that photo, I see essentially a wetland, right? Ferns, there's no tall vegetation. That certainly would not be an appropriate spot to build or have anywhere near have a building envelope. So my question is what I'm looking at in this photo, does that fall outside of any of the proposed building envelopes?
It does indeed, and it falls some distance outside of it. I didn't take that photograph. That's a photograph that is taken by Mr. Clark, so he would have to speak to it more definitively, but it does fall in the area down gradient of those building envelopes, well outside of them. And I believe it's within the area that we are recommending a 15-meter buffer around that portion of the watercourse.
Councillor, okay. All right. Are there any other questions from committee? Yes, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick one through you to Terry. With lot 1, lot 2, one's 109 meters and the second one's 152. Is that because of the building envelopes that you couldn't stretch that one lot to make the requirements needed?
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, if we were to take the total distance between the upper residential lot and the southern that exists today, at the setback distance required by the bylaw, we could create these 4 lots plus retained and meet those requirements. It'd be over 120 meters on each lot frontage, be closer to 130, 35. However, based on the EIS report, that is why that one lot line has been amended, and that's why then creates our undersized frontage. We could meet the 120 by moving everything, but it wouldn't be the most appropriate lot configuration as recommended by our ecologists based on building envelopes, wetlands, and conservation lands. So it was an adjustment from our original application, which we submitted for consent. The lines were adjusted based on the EIS.
Richard.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to clarify one point. So there's this notion that the zoning which is in place, which is Rural 1, allows for a frontage of 120 meters, and therefore we shouldn't be too worried about frontages. But it needs to be remembered that when we look at consent applications, the tests for whether or not a consent application, and that's what's happening here, is 3 new lots being severed through a consent application. The test is that the applications conform to the official plan, and the official plan indicates that the frontage should be 134 meters. So we have a situation where the official plan was approved in 2019, and the frontages for rural lot creation were increased to 134 meters. And we have a zoning bylaw that needed to be updated to reflect the new official plan. And of course, that's what's happened through the CPP bylaw. But I think what Mr. Serreras is asking us to consider is not applying the new official plan policies, which you cannot do. You need to consider those in relation to consent applications. So I just wanted, I know it's a technical detail, but I just wanted to throw that out there as the criteria that we're supposed to be considering in this instance.
Thank you for that. Your worship.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think, Richard, you probably answered about half of my question because it was going to be about the development rights of 120 meters versus what we have today currently. So I think you answered that. I guess what I would ask, though, do development rights apply back to 2006 when it was 120? And I don't know when development rights kick in or kick out.
So there is a provision in the Planning Act that it's in Section 24 of the Planning Act, and it does state that when council passes a bylaw, that the OP is deemed to comply with that bylaw that's passed. So what is being asked of us is to think of the old bylaw that was passed prior to this new OP as conforming to the current official plan. But I don't, and maybe it's a difference of interpretation, but I don't see it that way. I think that council has to pass a bylaw, and what that section of the Planning Act does is say, if council passes a bylaw that isn't necessarily in conformity with the OP, then the OP is retroactively deemed to be consistent with it. So it's minutiae, I know, but that's my interpretation.
If I might, the other part of my question probably is a bit historical too. Why in 2006 was a lot only deemed to be able to sever off 3 lots? And is that still currently our bylaw, only a 3-lot severance?
That's a great question. So through you, Madam Chair, that is a new policy of the 2019 official plan. So when we looked at, the provincial policy statement, the district official plan, we introduced policies in our official plan to restrict the number of new lots that can be created in the rural area. The idea is that we're trying to encourage development in settlement areas, in community areas where the services are, where the community facilities are, and we're trying to restrict the number of, or limit the number of rural residential lots that are created in the rural area where all the resources are. Because often what happens when you allow for fragmentation of the rural area into smaller land holdings is that you create conflicts for the use of those resources. Or obviously in the rural area, that's where most of our natural heritage features are. So the idea is to limit the amount of lot creation in those areas so that you can protect the resources for future use, but also ensure that those natural resources are going to be maintained. So it's a new policy, and what it does is say the lot that existed as of 2006, it can only be severed 3 times. So as you saw in that one figure, this one's, I think, at 6. So that's the idea there.
Sorry, one final follow-up to that. So if in 2006, the application where they severed off the first 2 lots, had they requested a severance of 5 lots, then it would have met our official plan at that time?
Yes, that's my understanding. There was no such policy in the 2006 official plan. It's a new one.
Thank you for that. If I may follow up on that, yes, Terry, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to clarify a couple of comments that the manager's indicated. Number one is the fact that development rights on land, and this is what Eric has lived with, and this is what applies to land out there, is not given under the zoning bylaw. That's the legal development rights on a piece of land. If you meet those standards, whatever you should. The issue then becomes one of, what do we do with the OP? It's clear in the Planning Act that the official plan is a futuristic document. It is there to give guidance, and in many cases, if it has a certain value or a numerical value in it, then as Mr. Clark has indicated, it must be implemented into your zoning bylaw to have real teeth. But you still got to consider that 134. I believe these lots meet that intent. We're still creating big lots, big frontages, in character with the area, protecting the environment, protecting the rural landscape, and creating additional housing. That's number one. The second thing is, when you pass a bylaw, whatever it be, if it's not in conformity with the OP, it's deemed to be in conformity with it. It's not the reverse. The OP is always there because that's where you want to go. And that's what you must consider. But if we were to consider in this case a zoning amendment on Lot 1 from 120 to 109, if that bylaw was passed, then it is deemed to be in conformity with the 134. So it's the reverse. You don't have OPs in conformity with the zoning bylaw. You have to go up the ladder. So in this case, you go up the ladder. And we're stating that there are provisions in your OP that allows you to do that. They're not, the 134 is not fixed. We must consider it,
Okay.
but the consideration is big lots,
Yep.
big frontages, and we've done that.
Thank you for those additional comments. If I may, because I think Her Worship touched on something that it occurred to me as well, and that was just to further clarify. We're applying something here under using our new OP policy. But if Mr. Lindgren had come forward back in 2007 at the earlier time of subdivision application, he could have come forward with a request for 5 lots, and that would have been approved. And what we're doing is applying our new policy under the new OP to something that happened in, retroactively, and that's the part that's a bit gray to me. I understand the thinking, I absolutely get it, but to me, it's somewhat gray, and I believe that your comments, Mr. Serraris, are well taken and the way I see it and what I'm hearing. But I do have a question for you, Richard, and that was the comment about using a Section 5126 agreement versus the site plan control, and I wondered your thoughts on that. It seemed to make some sense. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yes, thank you. Good question. So the 5126 agreement is another tool, an alternate tool, and can achieve the same result. However, it in our mind, when we look at building permits, when we look at site plans, we look first and foremost to the zoning bylaw. So it's our preference in all cases that if we're going to be putting in a requirement for implementation of an environmental study or whatever it is, a wildland fire, recommendations of a wildland fire assessment, or a tertiary treatment system, it's in the zoning bylaw. It's too easy for lands to overlook a 5126 agreement, so that's why we prefer it always.
So your definite preference absolutely is the site plan control.
Yes, and I
All right.
think it achieves, and you can ask Mr. Serraris, but I do think it achieves the same thing, the same
It's
outcome.
just a different tool. It's a
just
different way.
a preferred, more appropriate, from our perspective, tool.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, are there, yes, Councillor Armour.
I just want to say that I think this plan actually fits with the characteristics of Lindgren Road right now. I think this is the last large piece of property in that road. And I think it's actually a good thing, and I'd like to say that we approve this application.
Okay, will you be putting, you're
I'll
putting a
put that
motion?
forward.
All right, and Councillor Wiebe?
Thank you. So I would like to follow up again on the addition of the requirements for enhanced septic systems for these lots. As I said, I'm not necessarily opposed to this development, but I think that implementing things that that take away that gray area, it's a very safe way of ensuring that some of the differences of opinion when it comes to what's groundwater, what's diffused watercourse and not. That's a way of ensuring that regardless, the natural feature of that water is protected. So I'd like to see that applied to it as well, if we're gonna go
Okay,
that
so
route.
that, you're proposing that that would be included in the amendment?
Correct.
Okay. And, yes, Mr. Serraris?
Madam Chair, again, I'm assuming that the way we would do that is put it as a requirement, whatever agreement we put
It
on
would,
title,
it would go in the motion as a, I think, a condition.
but as part of the agreement, as opposed to, you wouldn't put it in rezoning, you'd put it in either the site plan agreement or the 5126 agreement.
I'm not quite sure where we'd put it. I'm
I
going
think
to
that
look
would be the
to,
appropriate
I will
tool,
look
but
to
that's up to council.
our manager of
Just want to be
planning.
clear.
All right, thank you. Richard?
Thank you. Yes, that's a good point. What I would suggest is that be written right into the exceptions that would be in the zoning bylaw for these
Right.
lots, so that, as I say, when you're developing these lots, you know what to expect. You're going to need the enhanced on-site sewage treatment. You're going to need to implement the environmental impact study, and you're going to do that through site plan control or community planning permit. So I would say it's best to have it in the zoning bylaw.
Okay. So that's our answer, and that's how we'll present it, and we'll have maybe some discussion. Do we need 1
Can I-
minute? Yes, Richard?
There's one more thing that I would like to consider as part of this motion, if this is the direction people want to go. And I can completely understand why you're thinking that. I would suggest that, if you remember, I showed you that the frontage was 109 for Lot 1 and 127 for the retained lot. What I would suggest is we also, if this is the direction committee wants to go, we apply a site-specific exception to the retained lot that would establish that frontage at 127 meters, so that we don't run into any problems at the consent stage, because we cannot approve a consent application that does not conform to the official plan. And as I referenced earlier, what you would need is a bylaw passed by this committee that says that this is the frontage that the committee wants to approve. So I would just wanted to put that out there as a practical thing.
Thank you for that, and I'm seeing a nod and nod from around the table, so that we will incorporate into the motion. And do we need 1 minute for this? Would people like a minute? Because I'm not sure it's completely ready yet. I'm getting, Julie is nodding yes, so we're going to take a 2-minute break while we prepare this. Thank you. Okay, doke, we do have the thumbs up. So, after all of that, I do believe, are you going to post the new motion? Thanks, Julie. I can read. Oh, well, it's a lot longer now. Oh, I'm not sure I can read it. All right, I have to squint. Could I read it? I have to squint. No, I've got reading. Okay. That's better? Yeah, that's better. Okay. That's good. Thank you. All right, now I have to do this. No. All right, that's good. All right, there we go. We have a motion moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that the following recommendation, it is recommended that Planning Committee recommend denial of zoning bylaw amendment Z02-2022 HT be substituted as follows. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z02-2022 HT, the purpose and effect of which is to amend the existing Rural 1 with exception 1633, RU1 1633 zone to a rural residential with amended exception 1633, zone a rural residential with exception AA, RR, AAA, zone a rural residential with exception BBBB zone with a conservation zone, all to permit the creation of 3 new rural residential lots with exceptions as follows. Exception 1633 amended. A minimum 9-meter wide treed vegetative buffer shall be required along the Lindgren Road east frontage with the exception of a 5-meter wide driveway. Development and site alteration shall be prohibited within 15 meters of the limits of any adjacent conservation zone, save and except for a 5-meter wide driveway. Development be serviced with enhanced on-site sewage treatment facilities, and no development and site alteration is permitted until such time as a site plan agreement or community planning permit has been approved by the town that implements all recommendations of the scoped environmental impact study and all updates thereto contained in the response to Town of Huntsville comments and mapping updates, both prepared by Mikulski Nielsen Associates Limited and both on file with the town. Exception AAAA, the provisions listed in exception 1633 amended shall apply, and the minimum required lot frontage shall be 109 meters. Exception BBBB, the provisions listed in exception 1633 amended shall apply, and the minimum required lot frontage shall be 127 meters. Whew. Thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments with respect to that motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you both for all of your comments. Thank you, Richard, for...
You'll have to just pass the main.
Oh,
You don't have to read it again.
okay, I just do have to, I was reminded I have to pass the main motion as amended. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So with that, we are turning to our next file, and that is with you, Kelsey. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 128 Vernon Shores Avenue. The lot is designated waterfront and is zoned Shoreline Residential 1. Within the community planning permit bylaw, the subject lands are contained within the waterfront residential 60-meter WR1 precinct, which applies to residential properties outside of any on the shoreline outside of any settlement area. Please note that the community planning permit bylaw was approved in July by council. However, it's not in full force and effect, although it's important to note the future precinct for context. The purpose and effect of the application is to rezone the parcel from Shoreline Residential 1 to Shoreline Residential 1 with exception to permit a secondary residential unit in front of the primary dwelling and within a 82.4 square meter detached accessory building on the subject property, and increase primary lot coverage from 10% to 12.5%. Within the zoning bylaw, secondary residential units are not permitted within shoreline residential zones. The detached private cabin is a permitted use within shoreline residential lots. However, lots have to be greater than 4,000 square meters, 1 acre, and would not be permitted and do not permit cooking facilities. The subject property is only 2,600 square meters in area, and the proposed secondary residential unit has cooking facilities, which would make it a secondary residential unit. Functionally, the subject lands appear to be similar in character to a rural backlot, situated away from the shoreline with frontage on a year-round maintained road. In rural and rural residential zone, detached secondary residential units are permitted. However, these detached units cannot exceed 75 square meters in these zones, whereas this proposed unit is 82.4 square meters. Looking at the relief for primary lot coverage, the increased primary lot coverage is required to ensure compliance, as it has been determined through this application that the primary lot coverage is in fact 12.5% despite being approved for 10%. So this would be an incompliance issue that would need to be addressed. The official plan does not provide provisions for secondary residential dwelling units within the waterfront designation. By virtue of this fact, the waterfront designation is not listed in the section D236, and it does not permit secondary residential units in the shoreline residential zones. So secondary residential units are not permitted within these zones to ensure protection of lake health, habitat, as well as limit density around sensitive waterfront environments. Although the property is not directly on the water, development in waterfront areas affects Huntsville Lakes, and uses such as these are better located in the town settlement area and rural designations. A secondary residential unit would not be permitted in the WR1 precinct if we were looking at the proposal under the community planning permit bylaw. And having regard for them not being permitted the approval would also not be recommended by staff. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and to the Lake Vernon Association. District of Muskoka planning staff reviewed the application and provided comments that the Muskoka official plan does not allow secondary residential units within the waterfront designation. Therefore, district staff were unable to recommend approval of the application as it does not conform with their official plan. It is worth noting that 3 letters of support have been provided in regards to the proposal and were provided to committee prior to this meeting. Through staff's review and analysis, the application would not appear to conform to the intent of the official plan or be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending denial. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. Is the applicant, if the applicant is here or their representative, please come forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of committee. I just have a prepared statement here. My name's Graham Huizinga. I'm a land use planner with Tulloch Engineering, 80 Main Street West in Huntsville, P1H1W9. I'm here today on behalf of property owners Kevin Ferris and Sherry Gibson, who are also in attendance. Kevin is here beside me. The application before you today would permit a modest second dwelling unit in a detached structure on the subject lands. As you'll hear from the property owners, the purpose of this project is to provide living space for the owner's mother, who is 79 years of age and a widow. The goal is to enable her to age independently in her own space while remaining in close proximity to family who can provide care and assist with household tasks. The town and district have both acknowledged the coming challenges presented by an aging population in Muskoka. The district retained consultants to prepare an aging study, which found that social isolation and access to suitable housing were 2 of the biggest challenges facing seniors in the region. The strategy for aging in place allows seniors to retain independence and reduces strain on the already overburdened long-term care industry. And we got a close-up look at how strained that industry is in the past couple of years. So I think this matter of discussion is especially pertinent today. The Planning Act was also amended in 2019 to introduce more prescriptive language regarding second dwelling units, stating that all municipalities shall have or develop policies permitting second dwelling units. This was done in acknowledgement of the ongoing housing crisis in this province, and housing for seniors is, of course, just one facet of that. Given this background, I have to say I'm a little disappointed that the town and district planning staff feel they cannot support this proposal. While it's true that second dwelling units are not expressly permitted in the waterfront designation, they're also not expressly prohibited, just as an aside. The subject lands are a back lot and are more akin to a rural lot in function, as Kelsey has just indicated in her staff report. The staff report states that the subject lands are over 100 meters from the high water mark, and due to the grade of Vernon Shores Avenue, it's not likely that any runoff from this property will drain into the lake. I therefore have to dispute the claim made in the staff report that the use is not appropriate because development in the waterfront area impacts Huntsville's lakes, and uses such as these are better suited to the urban center and rural designations. The proposed development will have no impact on lake health and is in keeping with the character of the area. While I do agree that second dwelling units are not appropriate in all instances in the waterfront designation, I feel that precluding them from any lands in the designation, which makes up a very large and growing proportion of the developed lands in the municipality, is needlessly restrictive when the other policies in the official plan can be met and satisfied in terms of protecting the environment, maintaining the character of the designation, and so on. The proposed structure can be buffered from the road and abutting uses. You've seen some photos of the site, and you can see that there's a significant amount of tree cover, and a lot of that will remain after the accessory structure is developed. We can also shore that up through site plan control. That was something that was discussed with town staff ahead of the submission. And the intended use furthers the land use policy goal of the town and the district to provide high-quality housing to seniors. Again, this is highlighted in the district's official plan and referenced in the town or the district's aging strategy that was completed recently. Comments received from the district focused on the potential for flood risk along the Causeway accessing the Vernon Shores Peninsula, and I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with the Vernon Shores incident in 2019. Staff comments indicate that due to historical flooding issues along the Causeway of South Drive, development should not be permitted in this area as it can become inaccessible to people and vehicles during times of flooding hazards. The comments go on to suggest that additional residential development in this area would not be consistent with the PPS or the official plan and is therefore not appropriate. Now, I'm sure this stance from the district would come as a surprise to the many seasonal and full-time residents of Vernon Shores, including the applicants for this proposal, who just built their home on the subject lands last year, as development has continued in Vernon Shores since the last flood event in 2019. A 13-unit subdivision was recently approved just west of the Peninsula, the Black Rock subdivision, or Black Forest rather, sorry, and it's partially within the flood zone. And on the Vernon Shores Peninsula itself, there are at least 8 active construction sites at present, most of which are not redevelopments, but are new builds on formerly vacant lands. So I pose the question to committee and to staff, why is that type of development appropriate? But a second dwelling unit on an already developed and established occupied residential property is not appropriate. Vernon Shores is an established community with dozens of developed properties. To my mind, the more pressing matter for this community is not whether development should be permitted within it, but how the town of Huntsville can develop long-term access solutions to Vernon Shores that will eliminate the hazard from flooding, blocking off access to these residents, as this is probably an issue we're going to encounter again, and probably sooner than we'd hope. In addition, it should be noted that the applicant's mother is already residing on the subject lands. The addition of the second dwelling unit will not introduce new residents to the property. It also won't introduce a new use, as the property is already being used for residential uses. The goal, as stated, is to provide their mother with her own space in order to retain a sense of independence as she ages. The new building will not be a new residential use, but accessory to the existing dwelling. In light of provincial direction on second dwelling units and the growing focus on how to address an aging population in this province, which I think is a matter we're going to be hearing more and more about, I believe the requested rezoning is appropriate and represents good planning. In my opinion, the town and district will be seeing more of this type of proposal in the coming years, and I urge committee and council to keep an open mind about proposals such as this one, which serve an important policy and land use goal. I'll let Kevin and Sheree explain more about their history with the property and their plans, but I'm happy to answer any questions committee might have for me. Thank you. Here, I'll switch. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Ferris of 128 Vernon Shores Avenue, Huntsville, P1H 2J2. My wife Sherry and I are the owners of the property situated at that address and subject to this application. I just wanted to relay to you the reasons for, and maybe a brief timeline leading up to this application being presented. My wife and I are new residents to the town of Huntsville within the last 18 months. However, we are not definitely new to the area of Muskoka. We have had the pleasure of having a family cottage on Lake Muskoka since the early 70s and are well acquainted with not only the beauty of the area, but also with preserving that environment and the rules, regulations, and procedures involved in facilitating that in regards to building an expansion. 5 years ago, my father passed away after his long battle with cancer, and my mother, Lynn, who is now 79 years of age, seated up here with my wife, continued to live independently in her home, which was a beautiful home located about 35 minutes north of Sault Ste. Marie, right on the shores of Lake Superior. I told her at that time that if and when the time comes, when she is ready, that she could come down and live with us. Despite being 79, she is a vibrant, active, healthy, strong, and independent woman, and is more like 79 going on 50. She expressed a 7 to 10 year plan of potentially moving down with us. My wife and I bought our current home, the one that you observed in the pictures, which was already partially built in February of 2021, and moved into it October of last year when it was completed. My mother was very active and excited for us in this process and made numerous visits during and after construction, and she as well fell in love with the area and all that Huntsville has to offer. Hence, this spring, she announced that she was ready to move down here with us to be closer to all family, including children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and this definitely accelerated our timeline. Changed from 7 to 10 years to, I want to come now. When COVID hit in 2020, we all witnessed how it decimated the retirement homes and elder care facilities across the nation. It exposed huge issues in regarding to how we care for our aging population. If it wasn't the virus that got them, it sure was the loneliness and isolation suffered by residents, unable to see family and loved ones for months and months on end. In light of that, the government at all levels did studies and commissioned reports and implemented policies and guidelines for the future, promoting family and municipalities to do exactly what we are proposing to do with this application here today. That is, to configure existing homes or build additions or standalone units to allow seniors to age in place with independence, dignity, and respect, and the family support and care to alleviate the stress on the public health system. Armed with this information and my mom's desire to move up her timeline, in April of this year, we entered into discussions with the town's planning department on how to properly move forward, turning this project into a reality. We engaged the services of a legal and planning firm, Weir Folds. We wanted to make sure that we were doing everything possible to adhere to all the rules, regulations, and procedures. There has been numerous conversations between my planning team and I and the town planning department. We have followed all directions and advice. It was decided that a rezoning was the best avenue of approach rather than just amending what was originally there. Any and all potential issues were addressed: size and scope of the project, environmental concerns, land ratio percentages, land use and parking, sight lines, and agricultural additions. An outside independent planning firm was also commissioned upon request and provided an extensive recommendation for approval for an approval report. Site visits by all involved parties were also completed and no issues were identified. Based on all this information, it was also recommended that septic modification permits be applied for in anticipation of the approval and build. That cloud permit was completed and approved already May 4th, 2022, and the permit, HUNT-2022-171, is sitting in the cloud and is ready for issuing. I just needed to pick it up. Throughout this entire process of 6 months, this started back in April, and considerable expense, everything has been positive and all indications have been given through the planning department that recommendations of approval is what would be made to the committee and council. Even up to and including any discussions my team had with the town planning department. As of 11 a.m. this past Friday morning, we were told that the report to committee recommending approval was being drafted, and we would receive a copy of which would be forwarded later that day for our records. You can imagine our surprise when at 3 p.m. Friday, some 4 hours later, we received a copy of the report, which was a complete reversal of everything that had been discussed, and it was a little shocking. So my question is what changed in 4 hours on Friday that had not already been addressed over the last 6 months? I believe the reports of my team, as well as the independent planning report, combined with Graham's eloquent response to the District of Muskoka's planning letter, should be put to rest any concerns moving forward. In conclusion, my hope is that the committee not lose sight of what this application is truly all about and approve it on its merits. The application to allow a senior to live independently with dignity and respect and the immediate and on-site support of family, if needed, moving forward to ride out her golden years. There is no impact to the environment. There is no impact to the surrounding community. The plan maintains the aesthetic charm and look and feel of Muskoka lifestyle and is supported by our neighbors. Subject to any questions that you may have, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. At this point, I will ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application. I'm not seeing any here. Are there any?
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay. Then with that, I will read the motion that's before us and then turn it over to committee. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend denial of zoning bylaw amendment Z16 2022 HT, changing the zoning from a shoreline residential 1 zone to a shoreline residential 1 with exception zone to permit a secondary residential dwelling unit on the subject property to be located in front of the principal dwelling and within an 82.4 square meter detached accessory building, and increase the maximum permitted primary lot coverage from 10% to 12.5%. So with that, I would ask if there are, yes, Councillor Weep.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I had a couple questions. One is, what is this a single-story, single-level building?
Yes, it is. It's a slab-on-grade, three-bedroom home.
Okay. And then my follow-up would be, at what point, or knowing that under different circumstances, the 75 square meter size would be appropriate or approved, given the right circumstances, you've elected to go with an 82, slightly larger. So I'm just wondering if there's been thought with to staying under that 75 square meter mark. Because I'm just wondering why 3 bedrooms is necessary for one individual.
No, the existing home that's on the property is a 3-bedroom family home.
Right.
Slab on grade.
But this is a 1-bedroom.
The addition, the separate building that we're wishing to build is basically 25 by 35 building, which I'm not sure what the actual square footage works out to in meters, but it's a 25 by 35 building, and within that building is 1 bedroom, a bathroom, a small kitchenette, and family room.
Okay, I was going to say it would be a tight 3-bedroom. Okay, thanks.
If I could just add, Madam Chair, through you, I think through discussions with you guys, the reason that it was slightly larger was just to give more open floor plan for potential future accessibility issues. I think that was a factor in the design.
That's correct.
So if I may, just on that question, because so you are asking for an exception to the maximum allowed, right? I think the maximum allowed for an accessory building is 75, right? And this is slightly, it's 82, right? And that was the reason is, okay. So in this request, you're also requesting relief from that as well, right? Is that, or do we need it in here? Okay, all right. Thank you for that. All right, I think it was Her Worship followed by Councillor Stone.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I thought you had a good question at the end. What changed in the 4 hours if you were expecting an approval? And maybe I'll ask Kelsey to enlighten us on that. But what I see here is, according to our official plan, we can't have a secondary unit within the waterfront residential designation. And I certainly understand that that may be the designation, but I don't see this as a waterfront. I see this more as a back lot. So unless you tell me something that I'm unaware of now, I don't know why our exception can't be to permit it in the residential waterfront lot. Certainly at the 75 square meters, you know, maybe 82 isn't a big stretch if we're making it an exception anyways, but maybe there's something that happened that we still don't know about.
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this decision was not without a lot of complexity. We did receive district comments on that Friday. So the district has recently done an OPA, which does not allow for secondary units within the waterfront designation. And our OP also doesn't speak to that. So that's why we didn't have the policy to support the application, even though we understand that this lot is more rural residential in character.
If I might just follow up, even with the district's OPA and our plan, we can still approve an exception in the waterfront designation.
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, it is at your discretion if you want to move forward with an approval for this property, if you'd like to do so.
Okay, Councillor Stone, thank you for that, Kelsey.
Thank you. And I agree with the mayor. I was going to say the same thing, that, you know, I don't really consider this waterfront, and the use is absolutely appropriate in my opinion, and I will support it. My question to staff is, can we put in a provision to say this can't be used for short-term rental?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, you would be welcome to add that provision to the approval, to the exception zone.
Yes, you'd like to.
And we welcome that. Like,
Okay.
Under no circumstance, this is what this is for. And even moving forward, years from now, hopefully, upon the demise of my mother, way, way down the road, our goal has always been.
She might outlive you.
Our goal, I love you, Mom. Our goal has always been that this is something that we, my wife and I, could transition to later on down the road, and hopefully, again, way later on down the road, and actually turn the main house over to our own children and families. At no time will this ever be used for a short-term rental.
Okay. Thank you for that. Graham?
Yeah, I should note as well, Madam Chair, if we're talking about adding conditions to the recommendation, we did speak, Kelsey and I, or the three of us, last week about adding conditions in that would cap accessory lot coverage.
I'm sorry.
Oh, am I too quiet? Does
Yep.
this one work? That one works. Yeah, okay, I'll use this. There we go. Sorry about that. We were speaking last Friday as well about adding potential site-specific exceptions to this property to cap accessory lot coverage in a manner that would basically just permit this accessory dwelling unit. No other lot coverage would be available for any other accessory structures, so that's a way of limiting overdevelopment of the property. And I believe the other recommendation, Kelsey, was that we include a exception for site plan control. So I think the applicants, we discussed that, and we were happy to include both of those as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's much appreciated, all of that. Kelsey, you want to respond? And I see you, Councillor Armour, but first I'm going to let Kelsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, those have been, were discussed, and there is an alternate resolution in place. The one thing that I wanted to clarify was that we do not permit short-term rentals in a detached unit, so I don't know if that would be redundant to include it, but it's at
Oh, that's a
committee's
good point.
discretion.
Right, that's a good point. So we actually don't need to do it, right? Because it's not allowed anyway, right? Okay. Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Chair Alcock. This is exactly, I think, what we've been talking about lately, about having accessory or granny suites on other properties. So my question is, I see in the picture you have the new septic system mapped out, et cetera. You don't see any issues with increasing the size of the septic system as it is?
No, not at all.
Fine?
All the measurements and all the calculations and everything were done, and if this is approved with the amount of water flow from having an extra kitchen, bathroom, whatever on the property, we have no issues with, and like I said, the permit's already been there, it's just waiting for me to pick up, and we can expand the existing. The tank will be replaced from a 4,000 to a 7,000 liter, and each one of the lines in the bed will be extended out. I believe on the permit was another 8 feet or 10 feet. Whatever it stipulates would be done, and it's a non-issue.
Councillor Weeb.
Thanks, Chair Alcock. I don't mean to be a stickler, but I'd be okay with overturning this staff recommendation if we stay within the prescribed 75 square meters. I know it's a small thing, but I'm putting that forward in my as an amendment.
Okay. So I think we're just going, Councillor Stone.
Just to Councillor Weeb's point, so what does that mean to the size of the accessory building?
It takes it within what's allowed. So instead of being, I think, 880 square feet, it would be 807 square feet, something like that? Is that what you're proposing, Councillor Weeb?
Right, to stay within what's
What is
allowable
allowed.
through our
It's-
bylaw.
Our bylaw allows for 807 square feet. Okay, so I need to ask a question here with respect to this.
What's that? Yeah, well, I'm just trying to do the math and what the dimensions are gonna be. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't think I need to.
Okay, that's a good thing. All right, so Councillor Weeb has just floated that proviso out, and I do need a seconder for that. There's my answer. Okay, we will carry on with the proposed amendment. And, okay, all right. So we do have a proposed motion?
Was there a second?
No, there wasn't,
Okay,
so it's dead.
Just confirming you're withdrawing.
Okay, thank you.
So somebody else would have to propose an amendment.
Okay, so I think we do have a proposal. So, Your Worship?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I would, I think we don't have one on the floor. I would propose to amend denial to approval with whatever exceptions are required in the motion, not with the reduction in square footage. If you're going to someday be a couple, you better have the 82 square
right.
meters.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And I have a seconder, Councillor Fitzgerald. Oh, you have a question? Oh, okay then.
I will second that motion. And do you have drawings for this building?
We have preliminary drawings, but the rest of the engineered and architectural drawings and stuff are being done up as we speak. And the only reason that we wanted to go to the square footage is because when you actually input in all wheelchair accessible pocket doors, when you put all those potential things for walkers, wheelchairs, or whatever, having that extra little space provides turnaround room in washrooms. It provides the ease of movement within the design. We're only talking, I guess, to switch from that down to the 75 meters squared would be changing the building from 25 by 35 exterior dimension, because the entire thing is going to be an ICF build.
Right.
So that would make it 25 by 33. But as goofy as it sounds, that extra 3 feet does make the world of difference when you're trying to incorporate disabled dimensions on an interior design.
That's an interesting point, because there will be future applications very similar to this, and maybe our chief building official is making note of something like that, and he's nodding, so that's good. Thank you. Yes,
All the
Councillor
more
Fitzgerald.
reason to support the mayor's motion and second it.
All right, all right. I do believe we have a motion all ready to go. And if I look at my original agenda, I should be. I have a motion moved by Mayor Terziano, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend denial of zoning bylaw amendment Z16 2022 HT, changing the zoning from a shoreline residential 1 zone to a shoreline residential 1 with exception zone 2, permit a secondary residential dwelling unit on the subject property to be located in front of the principal dwelling and within an 82.4 square meter detached accessory building, and increase the maximum permitted primary lot coverage from 10% to 12.5%, be substituted as follows. Planning Committee recommend approval of zoning bylaw amendment Z16 2022 HT, changing the zoning from a shoreline residential 1 zone to a shoreline residential 1 with exception zone to permit a secondary residential dwelling unit on the subject property to be located in front of the principal dwelling and within an 82.4 square meter detached accessory building, and reduce accessory, and increase the maximum permitted primary lot coverage from 10 to 12.5%, reduce accessory lot coverage from 5% to 3.1%. The land shall also be subject to site plan control to ensure vegetation is retained and there is an adequate vegetated buffer. Any questions or comments with respect to that? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and I apologize. I need to call the question. All those in favor of the original motion as amended? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you all for all of the work there. Thanks, Kelsey. That was good. All right. With that, Kelsey, we're back to you with report number development 2022-147, Z18 2022 HT 27666787 Ontario Inc., 2010 Burnell Road.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, this property is located at 2010 Burnell Road. Sorry, there's just a little missing a 0 there. The lot is designated rural and is zoned rural 1 with exception 0049. Within the community planning permit bylaw, the subject lands are contained within the rural precinct and contains portions of natural constraint 1 and 2 overlays, as well as containing the previous zoning exception. Though the community planning permit is not in force and effect, it is important to note these new precincts. The applicant proposes to develop the lots as a tourist establishment. The zoning bylaw amendment would change the zoning on the lands from Rural 1 Exception 0049 to Rural 1 Amended Exception 0049 to permit a tourist establishment with a maximum of 10 cabins with cooking and sanitary facilities in each, and 3 amenity buildings and an observation tower. A zoning bylaw amendment application in 2009. Sorry, here's some feedback. And site plan agreement application were approved for the property for 10 cabin establishment with cooking and without cooking and sanitary facilities, licensed lounge, meeting rooms, storage, and recreation facilities. The previous rezoning did not permit sanitary and cooking facilities within the cabin, and that's why this amendment is being sought. The scale of the development will remain the same as the original proposal with the 10 cabins. However, now with the sanitary and cooking facilities, obviously there will be changes in the servicing requiremements. So a feasibility assessment for private water and wastewater servicing prepared by KMBM was provided for the application to ensure that site could house private water servicing and wastewater facilities. The report noted that despite the anticipated poor soil conditions, the large area of the site will provide adequate space for an installation of on-site wastewater treatment systems. Additionally, the existing well source has adequate storage that is expected to support the demand of the proposed development. It's worth noting that upon initial review, it appeared that the septic system was in proximity to a wetland. In the report provided on Friday, we requested delineation of the wetland to determine if there be any negative impacts. The applicant has now provided an assessment which reviews the wetland, and based on their investigation, there's no wetland habitat present in the mapped location, and the geography is not reflective of wetland conditions based on the report that was provided to you at the beginning of the meeting. Therefore, the author has no concerns about the proposed wetland location and would not recommend any buffer for the septic, so this issue has been addressed. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. District of Muskoka planning staff reviewed the applications and had no objection. 2 letters of support were provided for the application and were provided to committee. It's worth noting that a number of questions were received regarding the access through the property, as it's used to access a number of backlots behind. And then also increased traffic for the tourist establishment. The applicant has confirmed that the access will remain in place for the abutting properties and the existing snowmobile trail. Staff also requested a legal opinion to address some of these concerns, and a legal opinion has now been provided to confirm and verify access will remain. In terms of increased traffic, the use has already been permitted in 2009. Based on the requested information being received for the wetland and for the access, the application would appear to conform with the intent of the official plan and the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Please note, to move forward with the recommendation of this application, we will need to suspend the rules suspend the meeting rules to allow for that recommendation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions in relation to this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. And at this point, I would call upon the applicant and the applicant's representative. And there they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of Planning Committee. John P. Gallagher, here with Lucas Rowe, one of the owners of the property. I think Kelsey has outlined the application well. I would like just to reiterate some points and clarifications, and then I think Lucas is just going to speak a bit about their vision and the sustainability features of their proposal. As Kelsey had mentioned, this land was zoned for a tourist commercial use of 10 cabins a number of years ago. It sat vacant. Eventually, the clubhouse of the German-Canadian Club burnt to the ground, and the previous owner put the property up for sale. My client was looking to do a project in this area along the lines of a tourist commercial, and contacted me, and the first thing we did was meet with staff with regards to the existing zoning and what we were proposing. The property rises from Burnell Road, and it's fairly level throughout. The soccer field is sort of at the back of the lot. The previous approved site plan had 10 buildings of 1,200 square feet, and they were all located on either side of the east-west road allowance that runs through the property. We've revised the plan to substantially decrease the unit size down to about 450 square feet for 8 of the units, and then we'll have an owner's resident and a family unit. So we've really scaled back the development. Part of the issue of going through the process was they required, they want to have cooking facilities and a washroom in the unit. The previous owner was satisfied that outhouses would work, but that never came to fruition. There is no increase in the number of units or the size. They're actually decreasing. The zoning was done in 2009. Site plan agreement was entered into in March 12th of 2010. After our pre-consultation meeting with the staff, they asked us to provide some engineering with regards to the water and sewer, and that was provided by Cambrian consulting firm. In the official plan, although it is already zoned for a tourist commercial use, I would just bring your attention to section 1.13 of the OP, 1.14. The town will promote the development of new or redevelopment of existing tourist commercial operations which complement the existing year-round tourism base. And in our opinion, we're really tweaking the existing zoning to make this a successful project. It is for a year-round tourism operation. 1.15 speaks to the town's continued support and growth and success by ensuring that the infrastructure can support the tourism industry. And the redevelopment of tourist commercial uses which maintain the intent, principles, and policy of the plan will be encouraged and supported. And all these policies above do support the proposal. They've decreased the size of the previously approved cabins. 2 of them will be at around the 1,200 square feet, the rest at 450. Detailed engineering has been provided to ensure the septic meets the requirements of the town and the district. It would fall under a building permit approval for the septic, as it'll be under 10,000 liters a day. The existing buffer along Burnell Road will remain in its place to minimize the visual impact. The cottages are set back far on the lot, away from the adjacent residential dwellings. The majority of the land will be left in a natural state. The buildings only account for about 2.4% coverage, whereas the bylaw would allow 10. And this ensures that the built form doesn't dominate the landscape. The owners will continue to use the existing driveways. And in the redevelopment of the land, some of the things that we're looking at doing, for example, to minimize impact would be taking the existing tennis court and converting that to a parking lot. It's already paved, it's underutilized, and it's not part of the plan for the new development as far as recreation goes. We're not looking to hard surface the parking lots. Anytime we can minimize the runoff is positive. Spoke a bit about the sewage. They did look at the well records previously, and I guess the well was producing 26.5 liters a day, and the daily design flow is actually, the water is actually 4 times greater than what they actually designed the septic systems for. So there's ample groundwater, and it's a 400-foot through the granite drilled well. The following uses are permitted in the rural designation: rural businesses, which include tourist commercial establishments. The proposal also is in conformity with the district official plan. With regards to the provincial policy statements, the application conforms to that, or is consistent with that, due to the fact that we're creating jobs, employment, tourist opportunities, and we're contributing to the town, while at the same time having regard for the natural environment on the site. As Kelsey had stated, at the last minute, we were asked to take a look at a wetland, and I was quite certain that there wasn't a wetland on there. We got a consultant planner to come up from Kitchener or Toronto? Bracebridge. Okay, well, it's not too far. Got them up in one day and got a report prepared in one day, and there was no wetland. So I think when some of the people had comments previously about using some of the OP maps on the CPP, this might be a good example of what might happen more often, and I just put that out there as in an effort to help in that regard. The lands are currently zoned for the use, and this would just modify that zoning. One of the other items that was always a concern, and it was a concern when I got the zoning the last time, and it had to do with the road that goes through there. As you may or may not know, depending on whether you're a snowmobiler, there is a main snowmobile route that runs through this site. Not to mention, there's quite a number of hunt camps to the east of the land, sort of south of Britannia and heading over towards the South Portage, which accesses from this site. There are no plans from my client to close that, move it, anything. People, when it's a public road, everyone is entitled to use that public road, and unless we were to close it by bylaw from council, it remains open and free and clear for people to attend. It's not a road per se that would be a smooth road. ATVs, some four-wheel drive vehicles can maneuver a fair bit. I did take a drive down the trail, the ATV trail, and it does provide access to a lot of people back there, so it is important that we keep it. My client was proactive in meeting with the snowmobile club, and they've provided a support letter in that regard. But again, I think it's important to note that at no time is the intent to close that. We've addressed that. We addressed the legal, and that's sort of why we've asked that the recommendation come on for approval. We started this with staff back in January to get our ducks in a row. My clients would love to get back before this committee with the site plan approval to address some of the finer details of the layout. And so we would respectfully ask that it be approved today. We're here to answer any questions, and I think Lucas just wants to say a couple words about his thought pattern and what he hopes to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you for that, John. And Lucas?
There we go. Yep, that's good.
It's good?
Yeah.
Okay. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Some of the things I'd like to speak to are the overarching interests in the site and how we'd like to operate it. The overarching goal is to operate this site as a social enterprise. So that is in theory, a for-profit charity. The goal is to develop the site as sustainably as possible. Everyone is well aware at this point of the world's issues with climate change and greenhouse gases and carbon creation, and the world construction, the construction industry around the world has a massive problem to address, and that is, how do we build carbon neutral? And this is it's a massive problem to address, and it's going to take years and years to figure that out. And we're setting out to start figuring out how do we actually answer these questions and solve these problems. So we've taken this into account with removing concrete, for example, and looking into bioconstruction techniques, panelization, passive house, and generally placing our developments in a manner where we are, from a foundational place, living lightly and impacting the land as little as possible. So the original approved site plan had the cabins placed within a road, within about 15 meters of the road allowance, and that saw cutting out large amounts of trees, which would have a huge impact on the natural environment. And we we've redesigned the site plan to locate the buildings as much as possible within areas where there is minimal impact to the land. So we're not cutting out trees and things like that. Furthermore, we plan to build an experiential vacation opportunity for guests that are coming here. And that really is to showcase how to live sustainably and also showcasing sustainable building practices. So we are really building into the fabric of how the site is created and how it's operated and marketed and who is brought to the space to showcase frankly, how to live and behave more sustainably. The world has this big problem to solve. It's not only the building industry that has to solve it, but it also has to happen at a consumer behavior level. And we're hoping to create an environment that helps educate people and starts to represent some of these more progressive needs within our communities and within the world. My organization wrote a fairly extensive impact strategy that we aligned closely to the official plan. And I'm happy to get into the weeds with anybody here, public, council, around how we actually plan to implement these on a tangible level. We've set out mission and values within my organization and for the site itself to align with tangible decisions. For example, no concrete will be used on the site. Permeable surfaces will be used. We'll locate buildings where no trees are going to cut down. Example, example, example. But there's far more detail provided in the impact strategy, so I encourage anyone to read that. And I'm happy to be held accountable. My organization's happy to be held accountable to these, because these are overarching goals for my business that we plan to tackle over the coming years and the coming projects. Generally, that's everything I have to say on that topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Lucas. That's really interesting, and thank you for choosing Huntsville. That's pretty neat. What's the name of your organization?
Umbrella Group.
Umbrella Group. Okay, maybe it was in the it was in the report. Thank you. Okay, with that, I am going to ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application. And then I will look over and see if there is anybody online.
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised online.
Okay, thank you, but apparently I missed a hand that was, yes. Okay, could you come forward? Sorry, I missed that. I'm
There's two or three of us that are gonna probably want to talk. But generally, I'm Andreas Apatow. I live right next door to the property at 2158 Brunel. You know, Lucas and I have been in touch since he bought the property. He's been really proactive. So thanks, Lucas, for that. You know, generally very supportive of this. I was one of the people that provided a support letter. There's a few things that I have concerns around that don't impact my overall support of the project, but just want to make sure that they're understood and heard at this level. So, number one, just in terms of the sewage and the water impact, we're also on well. So, understand that you guys have already done some analysis there, so hopefully that addresses that. Light pollution was my other concern. You know, we moved out there a couple of years ago, specifically because it's dark. Love that ambiance at night. So as much as we possibly can, we want to make sure that the light pollution is held to a minimum. And then in terms of use of the buildings, not just, you know, with Lucas as the current owner, but going forward, should they sell the properties, you know, I'm looking to make sure that there's approved uses of those buildings. The things that Lucas and I have talked about certainly meet that criteria, but, you know, I wouldn't want it to turn into a bar or something like that in the future. So, and then, you know, I think, I lost my train of thought. 1 second. There was one other thing.
okay. No worries. Actually,
Yeah.
I forgot to ask if you could state your name and write it down on the thing, just
Absolutely,
for
yeah.
the. Maybe I missed it. I missed a lot of things. So
No worries. It's Andreas Apatow.
All right.
Yeah. And sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry, that was it. Thank you. It's very honest. So the observation tower, obviously, I want to make sure it doesn't look into our property, into our house. Given the current plan, it's, I think the limit on the site is 11 meters, so we'd want to keep it to that. And given the current location where it's on the plan, I don't think that's going to be an issue, but that would certainly be something that we want to make sure gets addressed. So,
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Most welcome. And what, did I miss somebody else? Yes, please come forward. You're on.
Thank you, Committee, Madam Chair. Lucas, I'm his neighbor. I'm the one above.
If you could state your name
I'm
and
Lorenzo Maula. I own Lot 16, the one northeast of Lucas. From day one, Lucas and his team have been very professional, and they've highlighted everything that they want to do. I've also met Andreas and some of the other neighbors. I'm new to the community. I bought the property last year. I have about 100 acres, and I have a majority of the wetland that goes towards it. I do have a cabin, and my concern is the road, and Lucas has provided his recommendation. I just want to verify that that continues going forward in case Lucas does change his ideas on the property. In regards to when I purchased the property, Lucas and I have the same lawyer. This was verified that the road had access. The road is not only used by ATV and snowmobile. I do have security cameras. There's four-wheelers, there's trucks, there's cars, Honda Civics. So it isn't a really a low-maintained road. I would consider it to be highly used. My concern is also for the environment. There are turtles, there are frogs that are on the property. I want to maintain that habitat for them. But I also do have concern about the amount of garbage that I have on my land. Industrial waste, there's asbestos, there's oil. I've made these concerns to the committee before Lucas's project was in there. If there's something that the committee can verify or maybe put signs, I don't think the fines are adequate from what I see within the towns of Huntsville. I don't think there's anyone that should be subjected to oil cans being placed in the sewers or a property. There's a majority of the garbage that's there. Out of my own pocket, I will pay for cleanup. I do have contracts in place in regards to the property that I have. But I just want to go forward because there's going to be an increase in individuals using the area. I just want to make sure that the area is maintained pristine. There's bears, there's wolves, there's deer, there's baby deer on the property. Andreas lives there 100%, he can verify. So my thing is to maintain Huntsville, the prestige of Huntsville, and to work with the committee and to make sure that everything is done properly. But once again, Lucas and his team have been professional from day one, so I have no issue with what he suggested. I just want to make sure that the roads are maintained for everyone. And that road, I sent the map. It was already verified by my lawyer that it could be used by everyone. So it is a public road. I just want to maintain that. But it's not just an ATV and a snowmobile.
Right.
And there are snowmobile, there's a sign that says 50 kilometers. I don't think that's right. I don't think that area should have a 50-kilometer speed limit. I think that should be reduced to 15, and that should be going forward. In regards to the Snowmobile Association, that's a different issue. But there are individuals that have cut down my trees and changed my vegetation. They've changed the water stream that impacts that road past Lucas, so I think that might be a separate issue. But I thank the committee for listening to my concerns, and if there's anything else I can answer.
Thank you very much for that. And we'll wait. There are a lot of questions and things that need to be confirmed and verified. Just want to make sure that everybody has had an opportunity to speak. Okay. I think that Councillor Fitzgerald, did you? No. No. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Weeb. And this is in response to all of these.
Yeah.
We haven't read the.
Oh, do you want to
we
wait and
haven't-
read the motion first?
I think I should probably
Sure.
read the motion, and then we can follow up to all of those issues. Oh, we don't, sorry, yes, I need to act, sorry about this. I just realized this was originally for information only, but we do now have a motion. But we do need to suspend the rules of procedure, so I need a motion in order to do that. Do we have that? To consider whether or not. Thank you. Councillor Armour?
Yes, I, that motion forward.
Okay, perfect, it's right there. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that the rules of procedure relating to additions to the agenda where public notice has not been provided be suspended to allow for discussion and consideration of a motion for report number development 2022-147, Z18, 2022, HT, Ontario, Inc., 2010 Brunel Road. And I have a question from Her Worship.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, is it fair to suspend the rules on a planning application that wasn't provided notice?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can see that Richard is about to light up the screen.
That's a great question. And so through you, Madam Chair, the application itself was circulated. So it was posted on the property in accordance with all our public notification policies. So all the Planning Act requirements were met. So it has done that. I think the motion that we're reading is because the recommendation wasn't contained in the agenda that was published on Friday. So that's the real reason it uses that language.
So to follow up on that, if somebody who may have had an issue, they still could have attended the public meeting to speak to the report, because everything in the report that we're discussing was made public. Okay, all right. I will call the question on this motion to suspend the rules. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay. Now, do I have a motion that I can read? We don't have it printed, eh? All right. Okay. So I do need a mover and I do need a seconder. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend approval of zoning bylaw amendment Z18 2022 HT, the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning to rural 1 with exception 0049, zone to rural 1 with amended exception 0049, zone to permit tourist establishment with a maximum of 10 cabins with cooking and sanitary facilities which may accommodate a maximum of 60 persons, is a permitted use in addition to the existing facilities, which include 3 amenity buildings and an observation tower. Said cabins may be located within 3 meters of a municipal road allowance, no further than 15 meters south of Part 1 of 35R-7999. Okay, with that, are there any questions or comments? Yes, Kelsey, sorry, it's good.
Sorry.
Councillor Stone is right beside you.
Thank you.
Good thing.
Sorry, just noticed a quick thing there. It says existing facilities where it should just say facilities, because there's no existing facilities right at this moment, yes.
Okay. So you, okay, can we just put that on the screen again? That would be good, so we're good with that, with the exception that it shouldn't say existing, right? And it's been removed. I'll note that it has been removed, the reference to existing. Good, Kelsey?
I think it's that one that says no further than 15 meters south of Vernon. Yeah, wasn't that on the last? That wasn't the last one, yeah.
Okay, we're good?
Yeah, it is, just to meet the setbacks, I mean, like we have to
Wh-
meet the setbacks regardless, right? You're imposing a greater setback than
Kelsey, all right, I need to, you know what, I hate doing this, so I need to call 1 minute, 2-minute recess on this.
Thank you,
because,
apologies.
No, I don't like the back and forth in public, so a 2-minute recess on this, please. Thank you. Okay, I got the thumbs up. Isn't that great? Okay, Kelsey, are we good to go? Do we have a motion that we could share? Julie's going to share. That would be great. Okay, then I do have a motion, and it has been moved by, do we have a mover? Yes, Councillor Wiebe. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stone has seconded the motion. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend approval, is that approval of zoning bylaw amendment Z18 2022 HT, the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning to rural 1 with exception 0049 zone to rural 1 with amended exception 0049 zone to permit tourist establishment with a maximum of 10 cabins with cooking and sanitary facilities which may accommodate a maximum of 60 persons is a permitted use in addition to the facilities which include 3 amenity buildings and an observation tower. Said cabins may be located within 3 meters of a municipal road allowance. Okay, Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I'll try and keep my comments brief, but I want to thank the people that came and spoke today, especially the neighbors. I think it speaks well to know that there's a relationship forming when something like, oh.
I raised my hand, but
I'm going to have to eat my words.
Okay.
Unless you.
This is my mistake, my apologies, and if you meant to come forward, then I absolutely, please come forward now. That was, I moved it to the next phase.
it's a simple thing.
And in your name, sir, you have to,
My name is Andre Petrusco.
oh, yeah,
I'm
you,
the owner of.
okay,
My name is Andre Petrusco. I'm the owner of the lot 17
okay,
on concession 7. I've been using this or going to that property since early 80s. And it's not ATV trail. It's in 80s, there was no ATVs. Okay, we always went there by car.
okay,
And myself and other people, we try to maintain the road so it's usable for, getting there by car. My daughter drives just a small sedan, and she makes it there with no problems.
okay.
Not in the spring. But anyway, there was never, I cannot understand how this access from the Brunel Road to Concession 7, how it's gonna be. It's slicing Lucas's property in 2. Are we gonna be allowed to use it? And my concern is because when he just purchased it, he erected signs, road closed, do not enter, blah, 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 private property. So after nearly 40 years, I don't wanna be standing on the Brunel and thinking how I gonna get to my cabin.
Okay, much appreciated, and that will fit in nicely with some of the other questions that were raised, and I believe that there are a number of councillors that will be following up on that.
That's
Thank
all
you.
I wanted to say.
Perfect, thank you, and if you could sign the paper, that would be great. Thank you, your name and address, that would be good. All right, thanks for that. I think we've covered everybody from the audience. So I'm back to you, Councillor Wiebe.
Okay, thanks. I was going to say, I think it should be noted, I'm glad it's noted in this meeting and to our staff, that there is, obviously, there is still a little bit, there are still some issues or potential issues with this road and with things like refuse and who has use, et cetera. So I'm glad that those have come up, but I also was gonna, the latter part of my comments were gonna be also applauding Lucas's efforts. I think that he's demonstrating the future of how buildings will be built. And I think he's touched on something really important, and that is once people enter and are able to spend some time and see up close how buildings can be built, they suddenly realize maybe this is something that I've missed out on. Maybe this is something that we need to consider going forward. So I want to applaud you for that and promise you that you and I will get into the weeds on some of these issues, because this is an industry and a way of building that I am quite, not just working in it, but am passionate about. So bravo to that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wiebe. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Just a quick question to John. I think that's a concession road run. Town concession road runs through there? So we won't be able to close it off. And then my second question is this going to be a year-round or just a seasonal?
It's year-round. I use it year-round.
No, the cabins.
I think the cabins, the question was, yeah.
That's okay.
And John, you're coming forward to respond to the issue around the road. That's what I would like.
Just, okay, with respect to the road allowance, there's actually a number of road allowances. So there's one that's a municipal road allowance that runs east and west between my client's property and on Andreas' property. There's also a road allowance that runs north and south on the east boundary, which is adjacent to Lorenzo's 100 acres and the subject lands. But at one time, there must have been an old road in Burnell that ran through and bisected this property to gain access to that easterly road allowance that heads off toward, that turns into the snowmobile trail. This gentleman is correct. It is more than an ATV trail. I wouldn't recommend driving a nice car down it, but I think cars can make it down there, and it has never been the intent. The legal opinion basically says that both of those are public roads. Once it's open, it always has to stay open unless closed by bylaw, and we're not making any application to close that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. There was reference to signs going up saying, and you're saying no signs. Okay, all right, because legally you can't. All right, thank you. Your worship.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Madam
Dan,
Chair.
you had a follow-up? Okay, we'll come back to you. Sorry. Okay.
While we're on the subject of roads, I don't know what road everybody's talking about, whether it's open, closed, who gets to use it. I don't know what road we're talking about. I've blown the drawings up as much as I can, and I can't figure out what road we're talking about. And the resolution said the cabins could be built within 3 meters of the road, and I don't know which road that is, but the resolution, rather than saying 3 meter setback, it said within 3 meters. So I need somebody to help me understand this application a bit more.
Kelsey, could you put the
Yes, I'd be happy to
The map up,
put
please.
forward the sketch up on the screen again.
Yep, that would
So
be great.
this kind of is our mapping, which is the zoning layer, which kind of shows that indent. So that's a part of it. The road allowance. And then you could kind of see that chunk, and then there's that kind of path you could see from the lack of vegetation. So that's where it continues, and then you could see the lines. Sorry, my cursor doesn't really show. Oh, there it is. So you could see there's where it continues, where people access their property, and then there's an unopened road allowance here, there. So there's a lot of things going on, to say the least. And then I can't zoom in because it's a PowerPoint, but you could see there's the road, and it traverses through the property and snakes around like that. So this is a road allowance, and that's what that provision talks to, the 3 meters that was included in the original exception. So we weren't asked to take it away, so we just left it in. But yeah, as John mentioned, we did receive a legal opinion about the ownership of these pins, because it is a bit confusing, and they have verified that they're public roads, and as John alluded to, if they wanted to close them, that'd be a public process through a committee.
Right. Your worship.
Yeah, so just Kelsey, so what you just highlighted there with your cursor on that little drawing is a road that doesn't belong to the property. It's a public road that goes through the middle of that property, is that?
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. It's an unmaintained road allowance.
No, it wasn't unmaintained.
Excuse me, sir, you can't jump in. Yeah, no, thank you.
What I mean by unmaintained is it's not currently maintained by the town. Yeah.
Thank you. Your worship, are you good? Not, you're not here still. It appears that there are a number of things going on with the property. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, is this a seasonal cabins, or will it be year-round, or just the 3 season? The cabins themselves?
And the project is for year-round occupancy.
Okay.
Proposed to make it a year-round
Lorenzo, I apologize, but you had your opportunity, and this is at this point for committee only. Thank you. Councillor Stone.
And just for clarity, so the road use, so I see the property here, so I see where you can come in the property with the designation, but then it goes right through the middle of the property, and everybody can use it, and everybody has a right to use that, is that correct? How come it's not identified in our mapping?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stone. I don't know the answer to that. It just might be layers in our GIS that don't mesh. Like, it does show the one indent, but I did speak to our GIS department and they didn't have an answer, but a lot of things, I think the mapping gets a bit complex, so there's no particular reason for it.
All right, thank you.
On this question, is there something, if we were to pass this bylaw today, that guarantees that this road will be maintained, or not maintained, but will remain open? Is that something that is required or whatever?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I don't think we could ever recommend that it's always, or guarantee that it's always opened, but we can say that if they wanted to close it, future property owner wanted to close it, it'd be through a public process that would consult the abutting landowners.
And that would be redundant because that would have to happen anyway, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for that, Kelsey. All right. Are there any other questions with respect to this? Okay. All right. With that, then, I have read the motion. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for your input today and everybody who came to speak to this application. Thank you. And Kelsey, thank you to you. So, all right. All right. Okay. Kelsey. We're on to our next application, item 7.4, report number development 2022-145Z 15-2022 HT and SPA 105-2022 HT with regard to 2724-107 Ontario Limited at 155 Haynes Road.
Great, thank you so much again, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 155 Haynes Road. The lot is designated business employment and is zoned highway commercial with exception 1405 and natural resource. Within the community planning permit bylaw, the subject lands are contained within the urban business employment precinct and in the flood zone precinct, and contains portions of flood zone and natural constraint 2 overlay, as well as lands containing the previous exception zone. Though the community planning permit is not yet in effect, it's important to note for context what the future precinct will be. Rezoning application and site plan application are before you. However, please note the public meeting portion only pertains to the rezoning. The application has been provided to rezone the lands to from highway commercial with exception 1405 to highway commercial amended exception 1405 to increase the maximum building height from 11 meters to 12 meters, permit a maximum 5.8 meter projection above the building's flat roof for construction of ornamental parapets and mechanical structures, and decrease the front yard setback from 15 meters to 13.8 meters for the four-story tourist establishment. As the site's front property line is in an irregular shape, the front property setback only affects the closest perpendicular measurement from the front property line to the building. In this case, the proposed front yard is 1.5 meters less than the 15 meters required, but this condition only exists in a small portion of the lot frontage. Looking at the height, the proposal includes a four-story building with a flat roof at 12.7 meters and ornamental parapets and mechanical structures that project above that flat roof to the height of the maximum that are only a width of 19 meters, that parapet, in comparison to the whole length of the building. A visual impact assessment prepared by N Architecture was submitted to address these provisions, the visual impact provisions of the official plan. Based on the assessment, the proposed 4-story hotel will be set back appropriately from the surrounding property lines and backed onto the tree canopy. This will help minimize the building's overlook and shadowing effects on the neighboring lots. Although the proposed 4-story hotel will project above the tree line from Highway 11, the setbacks given for the proposal and the buffer of trees between the hotel and residential area the tree canopy will visually dominate with minimal to visual impacts for the budding residential properties. Natural constraints mapping identifies a cold water stream, wetland, and steep slope areas on the property. A scoped environmental impact study was prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions. The author of the report confirmed that the stream is cold water and inventoried the flora and fauna on the property. A 30-meter buffer between the stream and development is recommended and is to be implemented in addition to stormwater management measures, erosion and sediment controls, and a geotechnical survey. Provided all suggested measures are implemented, the author of the report anticipated no negative impacts from the proposed development. Should the rezoning be approved, the mitigation measures will be implemented and enforced through site plan control. The application was circulated in accordance to the provisions of the Planning Act. District planning staff had no objections to the application, and district engineering staff did not have an objection, but noted the developer is responsible for ensuring there's adequate water pressure and for domestic use and fire suppression. The town's operation department had no objection with a functional servicing report. However, further detailed design must be submitted, as well as an addendum to the scoped environmental impacts study. Was also requested to confirm that the stormwater and site servicing plans address mitigation measures appropriately and ensure the plans do not impact the cold water stream. The Fire and Building Department commented that access routes must follow the Ontario Building Code, and the Building Department also commented that removal of all hazardous substances shall be verified by the ministry as required under the Environmental Protection Act prior to building permit being issued. A letter of objection was received and provided to committee. The objection speaks to concerns about the proposed height, visual impacts to abutting residential uses, and the character of the development. Staff have reviewed this comment. The overall building height is increasing 1.7 meters with the ornamental features on the flat roof positioned on the portion of the building facing the road. Therefore, the design is intended to be towards the abutting highway and commercial uses to be readily accessible in accordance with our official plan by passing motorists and minimizing visual impacts to abutting residential areas. The rezoning application would appear to conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. The site plan application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement as well, and staff are recommending approval of the site plan application subject to the conditions to address the outstanding matters noted in the report and any requested revisions asked by review agencies. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or the applicant's representative.
Chair Alcock, I do see one hand raised electronically. I'll now
Perfect.
bring them into the meeting.
Thanks, Jen.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Natalie Gervasio. I work with N Architecture Inc. We are representing the applicant, and we are the architects on the file. I'm just going to share my screen now. So we are proposing a Fairfield by Marriott hotel at 155 Haynes Road in Huntsville, Ontario. The purpose of this meeting is to rezone the subject lands from a highway commercial with exception 1405, zone to highway commercial with amended exception 1405, C3, 1405 amended. The zoning, the purpose of the zoning application is number one, to increase the maximum building height from 11 meters to 12.7 meters. Two is to permit maximum 5.8 meter projection above the building's flat roof for construction of ornamental parapets and mechanical structures. And three, to decrease the front yard setback from 15 meters to 13.8 meters. The reasons behind these rezoning applications are for a 4-story tourist establishment. The surrounding site, the site is located on Haynes Road, which is northeast of the intersection at Highway 11 and West Road. The lot area is 6.92 acres and the lot frontage on Haynes Road is 337.72 meters. Figure 2 and Figure 3 capture the existing conditions of the site at 155 Haynes Road. The land is currently vacant with natural vegetation, shrubbery, and trees on the property. The site is across from a commercial/industrial area. Towards the back of the site, where the residential neighborhood exists, the native trees become more dense. There's a creek running parallel to the rear property line. We have a few images of the existing site conditions here from Haynes Road, and on Figure 4, we have an aerial view of the site showing those that natural vegetation on the site and that dense tree network facing the abutting residential property. The proposed development, the site plan in Figure 5 shows the site with the proposed hotel on the currently vacant land. There are 2 vehicular accesses to the site. The proposed building floor area is 5,237 square meters, including a total of 104 guest rooms across 4 levels and 130 square meters of commercial use on the first floor. You can see in Figure 5, this is our proposed site plan with the proposed hotel in a yellow hatch here. And you can see at the back, there is an existing water course with a 30-meter buffer towards the hotel. Our zoning amendment item number 1 is to increase the building's height from 11 meters to 12.7 meters in order to allow the proposed tourist establishment to accommodate 4 floors for maximizing tourist accommodations and supporting the economy within the town of Huntsville. A visual impact analysis was submitted to the town to support that there will be no negative impact on the surrounding area. Zoning amendment item number 2 is to permit a maximum 5.8 meter projection above the building's flat roof. This will allow for construction of ornamental parapets to shade the building's front facade and give character to its design. The ornamental parapet will also function to conceal mechanical structures behind it. This 5.8 meter projection is only considering the highest parapet here at the front entrance. Our zoning amendment number 3 is to decrease the front yard setback from 15 meters to 13.8 meters. In order for the building and the surrounding site plan to not infringe on the water course to the back, it must be pushed towards the front yard, causing the front yard setback to be deficient by 1.2 meters. However, since the front yard is in a regular shape, some of the front yard setbacks are much greater than the requirement, making the front yard very spacious. So this 13.8 meters setback is only considering one area of the whole frontage. The frontage is much greater in other areas. Our conclusion states that rezoning of the property to amend the previously listed bylaws will help to provide a more visually appealing, tourism supporting, and considerate development. By allowing an increase in maximum height, more hotel rooms can be provided to support the influx of tourism in the town of Huntsville. By permitting 5.8 meters of ornamental projection above the flat roof, shading and concealing of mechanical equipment can be provided. By decreasing the required front yard setback, the buffer to the watercourse and natural vegetation behind the proposed hotel can be maintained to support existing ecosystems on the property. That would be a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Madeline. If you could hold on, as we might have questions a little bit later, but at this point, I will ask if there are any members from the public who would like to speak to this application. And I see we do have one for sure.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Larry Ross. I live on 36 Goldie Street. I've just got a very brief presentation. I know it's been a long day for especially those who were in Committee of Adjustment this morning, so I won't be long. Yeah, if you don't mind, Kelsey. First thing I'd like to say is thank you to Kelsey for all her help. The technology is beyond me, so. How do I advance it, Kelsey?
You just click this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is just a summary of the application. And the exception of the height, 11 meters is allowed, as you know, and they're asking for 12.7 meters. And we all know that that makes the difference between a 3-story building and a 4-story building. That's really what this comes down to. So the concerns that we have are specifically related to the height exceptions. We understand that there's zoning in place here that allows for the 11-meter height and that, you know, they're allowed to build that building, but we're concerned about the height exception. And I'd like to focus specifically on a couple of sections out of the Town of Huntsville official plan. And one section has to do with character. So I'll just briefly go through it. This is section 2.1. The particular character and values of each designation will be protected and enhanced. The character of a designation or particular area is the essence which defines that area and provides a sense of identity. Character is established over time and is rooted in the following. And one of those things I mentioned is extent and form of development, density, intensity of use, and height. Here's another section, section 3. This is in the Huntsville urban settlement area, protecting character. Where new development occurs adjacent to existing development, the new development will be designed in a manner that reflects existing built form, including such matters as height, building mass, and character. Where new development involves increased densities encouraged by this plan, the development shall be designed to provide either a transition in height, density, massing, and setbacks, etc., between existing development and new development where practical, or design features that mitigate potential impacts between the new and existing development. And again, other sections of the official plan deal with the same thing. I won't go through this in great detail, but this section talks about it's important to consider minimizing overlook and shadowing of adjacent residents. So lots of references in the official plan to character. So I just want to show you some pictures to give you an idea of the character in this area. And I know everyone here is familiar with this area, but this is looking southwest from the proposed property. There's a restaurant there, single-story building. This is looking to the west from the property. There's a car dealership there, single-story building. This is looking, again, to the southwest, another restaurant, single-story building. Here is looking south from the property. There's a couple of restaurants and a gas station, single-story building. This is a vacant lot to the south of it, and this is a typical house on Goldie Street. Again, Goldie Street is a single-family residential subdivision mainly, and consists of single-story and story-and-a-half buildings. So, you know, this just, the purpose of these pictures is just to give you a sense when we think of that whole area that surrounds this, this is an area of typically single-story or story-and-a-half buildings at the most. They're now coming in and proposing a 4-story building. So this, in my opinion, is out of character for this area. And, you know, we understand, again, when this committee granted an exception in height to the hotel over by Wendy's, you know, that's in a valley. It's surrounded by, you know, high cliffs and so on, high vegetation. That makes sense. But in this area, this particular piece of property that they're on, this is actually the highest point of land in the area. So anyway, the other thing that Kelsey was kind enough to send me a copy of the visual impact analysis, and I'm sure committees had a chance to look at that. I went through that in detail, and there's a lot of nice computer-generated pictures in there that show this and that and different views, but the crux of the issue here is there isn't a lot of vegetation on this particular site. There are a few evergreen trees that are relatively low. Most of those will be wiped out by the hotel construction, and other than that, it's fairly sparsely vegetated, mostly with deciduous trees. What I'd like to know, and which I couldn't find in this visual impact analysis, is how high are those trees? Did anyone go out and measure them? What's the impact of a 4-story building? Like, they show a picture of, you know, well, it'll blend in with the tree line, but again, without knowing that data, how can we really understand what the actual impact will be? And, you know, we're concerned on Goldie Street that this 4-story will have the effect of destroying our privacy because, you know, there's no tree coverage back there that will be left to sort of protect our privacy. So anyway, that's sort of the crux of my presentation. I have my wife did go around and speak to the neighborhood, and I have a petition signed by 15 of the local residents who, again, are all, our only concern here are the height exceptions. That's it. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Larry. Is there anyone else who, yes, please come.
Chair Alcock, I will let you know as well, there is someone online with their hand raised as well.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
I was trying to copy what everyone else was doing. My name is Madre Secord. I live at 37 Goldie Street in Huntsville. And thank you, Larry, for that presentation. I do have to agree with the out-of-characterness, if that's a word, of the structure of the building in our neighborhood. One of my concerns as well is the height extension that's being requested is basically equivalent to another story. I am concerned about a couple of things. One is the out-of-characterness. The other is building around the area. I'm concerned about what damage can be done to some of the the trees in the area. Will they survive the construction, and therefore minimize some of the privacy that we could be afforded? And my third concern is the light pollution. So it's one of the few little spots in town that we can sort of enjoy, like right in town, that we can enjoy a night sky, and I'm afraid that might be lost to us as well due to this increased height.
Thank you for that. And if you could, Madri, sign and all of that stuff. Okay, and I don't see anybody else, so online we have someone who wants to, okay. Thanks, Jim.
I'll now bring them into the meeting. A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Hi. Hi, my name's Gail Spears. I live at 28 Goldie Street, and I'm also here representing my mom, which lives at 30 Goldie Street. Thank you, Larry, for speaking for Goldie Street residents. I feel exactly the same. I am concerned about the height. I just purchased the house at 28 Goldie Street to be close to my mom. I also live at 43 Goldie Street. So we have 3 buildings on the street. Again, I am concerned about the height extension looking into our backyards because the tree line is not that high. I think Larry and the other lady, which I haven't met, have some good points. And sorry, I'm nervous. I'm not usually doing this, but
Don't worry at all. You're
Yeah.
fine. We can hear you and everything's fine. So,
yeah, I was there, but I had to leave. But I do want to raise our concern with the height and support Larry with what he's saying.
okay, we appreciate that and the effort that you've made to join us. So, and sorry we didn't get to you earlier.
Nope, that's fine. You're very busy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone else? No. Okay, so I do have a motion that was prepared, and I will read that motion. It has been moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend that zoning bylaw amendment Z15 2022 HT be approved, the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning from a highway commercial with exception 1405 zone to a highway commercial with amended exception 1405 zone, to increase the maximum building height from 11 meters to 12.7 meters, permit a maximum 5.8 meter projection above the building's flat roof for construction of ornamental parapets and mechanical structures, and decrease the front yard setback from 15 meters to 13.8 meters. So with that, I would open it up to questions. We're starting with Councillor Wiebe.
Shocking. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Alcock. I've got a few concerns as well about the height. I think that the visual impact study that was submitted does a few things that I think are either incomplete or slightly misleading. One is the view from the highway essentially shows a flat, level spot from which where you would be driving by. But we all know that there's an underpass there. The ground is considerably lower where that highway is compared to where this building is, and that has a demonstrable effect on visual impact. And I think that even if it were flat the way this is depicting, the building itself, the outline of that building protruding above the tree line, is evidence enough that this is too high a building. I mean, what they've submitted is proof enough to me that this is projects too high above the existing tree line, and for that reason, I'm not willing to support it. The other thing I don't think that they obviously considered was, what does it look like from Goldie Street? How much shade is cast by this building onto a whole number of residents in that area? You know, natural light's a big thing, and I don't think that, you know, asking for a slight exception and then creating a much larger parapet to create all that shade should be taken lightly. So that being said, there's no way at this time that I can support it. The other exceptions on the file in terms of the setback, et cetera, I have no problem with. And the woman who spoke for the architectural firm highlighted that, and I totally agree with her. In fact, if the building were even slightly bigger footprint, I don't think that looking for exceptions on setback would be an issue for me. But the height certainly has serious ramifications, and at this point, there's just no way that I could support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wiebe. And Councillor, sorry, I'm going to Stone because that's who I saw next. So Councillor Stone. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, so I just want to talk this through. So I agree with Larry that all the buildings around there are single story. It is a transition area. It's highly commercial on one side, and they get backed right against Goldie, which is a old traditional neighborhood, which we love and want. They're asking for 5 feet, and that's all there was, another 5 feet high. I know the parapet, and tell me if I'm wrong, is going to be on the front of the building, which shouldn't impact the worries of Goldie Street. I do have a question, and I couldn't see it on the drawing. There is a distance marker between the back of the building and the property line. If your drawing is better than mine, then you might be able to see the distance. I'm curious about that. And I do agree with Councillor Wiebe. We've seen in the past some visual renderings from the lake, from the hill, and it's been quite exacting. And you know exactly what you're going to see above the trees. And so I would like to see that before I would be comfortable with anything on this. I'd also like to know where the sun rises and sets. Is this going to cast a shadow over the whole street or not at all? I don't know.
I certainly agree about the renderings, you know, considering anything to do with height exceptions. And I think those renderings would be really useful to see.
It absolutely
if you're
would.
looking from Goldie Street. And as to your point, Councillor Wiebe, you know, from the highway looking in. Anyway, I'm jumping in and I shouldn't.
That's all right, thanks. If Kelsey has the answer, distance from the back of the proposed building to the property line?
Yes, thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, I believe if I'm looking at it correctly, it would be 69 meters.
69 meters?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And there's also the buffer as shown. So yeah, the 69 meter setback is where my cursor is, if that's the correct one you were asking about.
All right, so if we were to go forward, I'd probably defer in order to get the visual renderings that would be more appropriate to make a proper evaluation.
So you might consider a motion to defer. Okay, I'm going to Councillor Armour, followed by Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I was going down the same road that the other two councillors have been going down, so I think it's better to defer this because we really can't see that rendering there. And I think you're right, it's going to cast a huge shadow on the back, so I'd echo that.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Appreciate everyone's comments so far. And I just wanted to confirm with Councillor Stone, you said 5 feet in the, it says 5.8 at the beginning of the, and let me understand, it's 12.7 is 1.7, but then there's 5.8 meters for the parapets above. So total feet is 36 feet is what we normally would allow with the 11-meter bylaw. 60.69 feet with all the allowances is what the height will be.
Right.
That's considerable.
That's exactly right. It's in the sense, it's not just the 11 meter to the 12.7, it's with the addition of the 5.8 meter projection for the parapet. So, okay, thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Is that okay? And your worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to defer this to see some other things. And, you know, truly, we all like to deal in feet better than meters. And a 36-foot building to a 41-foot building is not something that if I saw the sight lines and things that I couldn't live with. I just don't understand why we would approve another 20 feet on top of that building. That's the piece that gets me more than just the extra 5 feet of building. And I want to see some renderings and I don't even understand why we need that. It looks like the parapet across the front of it there's some height everywhere, and then the 5.8 in the middle. And like, why would we approve another 20 feet sticking up in the air? I don't understand.
Okay, so Kelsey, I'm going to let you respond to that before I go to Councillors Wiebe and Stone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it'd be helpful to see the elevations to see where the parapets sit on the building and where the height is increased for that additional ornamental features. Okay,
Sure.
great. I'll just prepare my screen.
I think I am hearing generally while you're looking that we would like a deferral of this item. Okay, good. With a number of requests to go with. All right. I know that I have at least two councillors who are chomping at the bit. I think Councillor Weeb was before you, though, Councillor Armour. Councillor Weeb, did you want?
Well, sir.
Okay, are you ready, Councillor?
Yeah, it's on
Okay.
the screen if that could be shared.
Okay.
So that just kind of gives you a profile view of where those ornamental features are on the building. Just thought that might be helpful.
So at the front,
Mhm.
at the front, right. But it would still be an issue of that extra height. And again, without seeing those other drawings, the other renderings of what it looks like when you're standing on Goldie or whatever, I think that would be really helpful. Okay, Your Worship, is this a follow-up?
Yeah,
Because-
just to follow up to the picture, Kelsey, can you confirm the 3 lower parapets, how tall they are? Because I assume the 5.8 meters is just the one in the center. But definitely, there's a picture that shows those other 3 are up above the flat roof as well.
Thank you for the question. I can't confirm all the heights. I think the 5.8 is to address the highest one in the middle, and the ones obviously are of lesser height. I don't know if the consultants on the line and would want to confirm those heights of those other features, but I don't know them off by head.
Are the consultant, is she still with us?
She does have her hand raised. Do you want
Okay,
me to bring her
perfect.
in?
Yep. I know
Thank you, Kelsey.
It's really difficult to read the numbers there completely. Anyway, sorry.
No
Go ahead.
problem. I have the numbers here. So the 5th floor, so the ceiling of the 5th floor would be 12.7 meters, and then the lower parapet would be 13.9. And then we have the highest parapet at 18.5. Sorry, we have 3. We have a low parapet at 13.9, a higher parapet at 15.1, then the highest parapet in the middle, 18.5.
Thank you for that. All right, that answers your question, I think, Your Worship. And so, Councillor Weeb, you wanted
I
to
did.
jump in, and then followed by Councillor Armour.
Okay, thanks for that. So I guess I go back to my original comments, but I want to say that within the report that was provided, that is a visual impact study. That's what they're relying on. They're telling us that this is what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. And I can't imagine it isn't as flattering as possible. But even still, as I said, even with that rendering and them displaying what it could look like or what it should look like, as it stands, there's no need to defer it. There's no need to get another impact study. It's too tall. And I won't be voting for deferral. I'll be voting this down. And that's my final sort of thought on it. So that's it.
Okay, that's all right. All right. I have to go to Councillor Armour first, and then followed by you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I was just going down the same road as Councillor Weeb was. I think this is a deferral, or sorry, this is a denial, and I think they should come back with a lower building.
Okay, so we need a new motion for that. Your Worship.
If I could just throw out to committee that rather than do a denial, can we still do deferral to allow the company to come back with a different proposal?
And that's-
Which isn't a visual impact study, it's a lower height.
And I think that actually makes more sense, because if we deny it, I don't know what the rules are as to bringing it back, and that perhaps we haven't given the opportunity to the applicant to
Could be a
come
good
back
learning
with
lesson, though.
yes, an altered proposal. So I think that makes sense. So in the motion to defer, I think we need something to direct, right? Direct that? And I'm seeing a couple of nodding heads. Would you, Your Worship, are you going to take a stab at that direction?
I would move to defer it to the applicant to come back with an application. I'm assuming they've just heard all of our comments, that we're not about to approve the height that they're proposing.
Right. So with a
height
revised
reduction,
application?
A revised application that addresses height.
Yeah. That meets the concerns, or just addresses the height. Okay. I see that Julie's making note, and she'll do some crafting there that will do that. All right. I think that's actually fair. Julie, do you?
Oh, just through you, Chair Alcock. I was just confirming, do you have a mover and seconder for this? Or are you still just discussing at this point?
I have a mover and seconder. I think Councillor Armour is moving, followed by Councillor Fitzgerald. Seconding.
And through you again, I just was wondering if I could take a moment just to
I
speak
think-
with staff, just to make sure I have it correct.
On this one, Kelsey, would you like to?
Thank you, Madam Chair, sorry. I just wanted to clarify, was there's anything else that you wanted to consider in the deferral in terms of
that's what I was
Goldie
thinking.
Street? Yeah, sorry.
Right. So I think what I heard was asking the applicant to consider an application that is within the allowance, not necessarily asking for an exception to it, because of all of the concerns that were raised around the table. So any other direction? Your worship?
Just that the current ask has a meter reduction in front yard setback and stuff, and I don't think we have a huge concern, and I think if
We
they're gonna
don't.
come back with a reduction in height, they
might
may
be able to
looking
take
at
it up
some
in the
other
footprint.
exceptions in
Right.
property lines.
So we are allowing some flexibility as to how they come back, and I think that would be a given, right? I think. Might be some other design elements as to transition that was made reference to, but that's okay. That's fine. All right. Okay, we're going to take 2 minutes to allow Julie to come up with some wording. Good. Thumbs up. Thank you. That's what's going on. Thank you. All right, we do have a motion that Julie's going to put up on the screen. And I can't remember. I think it was moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the matter of application Z15 2022 HT and SPA 105 2022 HT 2724 107 155 Haynes Road be deferred for the applicant to provide revisions to address concerns raised by committee. Fair enough? Any comments, questions? All those in favor? And that carries unanimous. Oh, almost, no, I know, okay, that carries. All those opposed? Okay, Councillor, we have one opposed. All right. Okay, then that deals with that, and in fact, we won't be dealing, we just dealt with SPA, so that just goes by the wayside, right? Julie? Okay. So I need to close out the public meeting. All right, now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. We will now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. And with that, I'm back to you, Kelsey. We are to deal with SPA 104 2022 HD, Muskoka Ready Mix Inc., 87 Stevenson Road 8 East.
Great, thank you again. The subject property, through you, Madam Chair, the subject property is located at 87 Stevenson Road 8 East. The lot is designated rural and is zoned natural resource, rural 2, rural special industrial with exception 0009. With the community planning permit, the subject lands are contained within the community and rural business employment precinct, the flood zone precinct, and the rural precinct, and contain the flood zone overlay as well as lands contained in the previous zoning exception M3009. As mentioned in previous presentations, the CCP community planning permit is not yet in effect but has been approved by council in July, and the precinct, future precinct is important to include in our presentations. The application has been submitted to permit a 580 square meter manufacturing plant with 2 silos and 474 square meter service garage. A minor variance, A48-2022, was heard this morning at committee to consider the height variance for the manufacturing plant. The requested variance, and it was approved, subject to the appeal period. The requested variances are to increase the maximum height from 11 meters to improve the maximum height from 11 meters to 15 meters, as well as approve a maximum height for 18 and 20.5 meters for the silos. Notwithstanding the height variance, the proposed uses are all in keeping within the permitted uses in the zone and appear to meet the general, all relevant provisions in the town of Huntsville zoning bylaw. Were this proposal to be reviewed under CPP, a Class 3 permit would be needed to review the approvals for the variance in height and the site plan. The proposed concrete batch plan is an existing cleared lot 100 meters away from Highway 11, making the existing batch plant visible from the highway. Although existing native trees help to screen much of the development from view, the proposed new batch plant will be equally visible purely from the necessity of the function of the plant, but will be clad in natural hues to better blend in with the natural environment. No additional trees will be removed from the site, and a 20-meter buffer will be remediated from the warm water stream on the property in line with the Riverstone Environmental Impact Study. A study was prepared by Riverstone with the application to assess the proposed development and potential impacts to the stream and wetland. The author of the report confirmed the stream is warm water and discussed the existing impacts from the abutting operation. A remediation plan has been provided and shall be carried out and enforced through the site plan. There is a Trans-Canada pipeline corridor on the subject lands. The applicant has consulted with the Trans-Canada Pipeline agency. The agency did not provide any objections, but outlined conditions to include in the site plan. The Fire and Building Department noted that a fire route and fire fighting water supply shall be provided in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. And we did receive comments from the district engineering department this morning, and they had no objections. We're still awaiting comments from our operations team and the Ministry of Transportation, though those shall be addressed when they're received. The application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and staff are therefore recommending approval of the site plan application subject to the conditions, outstanding matters noted in the report. Any requested revisions from the relevant review agencies. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kelsey. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 104-2022 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation conditional on minor variance application A48-2022 HTE being approved and in effect, and all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. Are there questions from committee? Yes, Councillor Stone?
Just one comment. We saw this at Committee of Adjustment this morning, and we approved it. I just want to reiterate that my desire for plantings for visual screening from the highway, and I hope that's included in the site plan.
Kelsey?
Thank you for the comment, Councillor Stone, and through you, Madam Chair. They will be included through the required landscape buffers.
Okay, thank you. And your worship? Oh, I'm yeah, I should, okay, sorry. Julie's asking me, is the applicant here, and would they like to speak? I apologize, I should have asked you that.
I'm here, but I think Kelsey covered it.
Okay, perfect, all right, thanks, thank you. All right, now your worship.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just the old building.
Oh, yes, thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, I believe they are to be demolished, and the new operation will be in place of this existing building.
Thank you. I'm assuming the new operation will be more efficient, and probably everybody's looking forward to newer buildings, I would suspect. Yes, Councillor Wiebe, did you have, no? Anyone else? Seeing none? Going? All right, I call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Kelsey, for all of that, and thank you for your patience. It's a long day. All right, and we have done that, baby. In looking at the agenda, we don't have any previous business, and I'm looking over to you, Richard, and we don't have any new business, but there is actually a little bit of new business that I just need to quickly say. The general information items are there for anybody to ask a question, but before I do our final motion today, I have to announce that Ms. Wolf, sitting beside me, Ms. Julie, I know Ms. Julie, just so I know whatever, is leaving, and today was her last day with all of us around this committee, but you're actually leaving next week? 2 weeks?
I guess, this week and another week.
So 2 weeks, and moving on to the dreaded, can I say? May I say? The dreaded, you already gave it away. I did, the dreaded, the district, the poachers, and they're stealing once again one of our best. And Julie, we are going to miss you. I'm going to miss you. You've been brilliant. You're fantastic at what you do. We were very fortunate to have you here with us for as long as we did, not long enough. But having said that, I'm going to say all the very best in your new job, and you're not very far. So somehow we're going to, well, somebody's going to cross paths, whoever that may be. We will miss you.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I do have a motion moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that we do hereby adjourn at 4:28 p.m. All those